Woofda. Okay.
You still got a minute, but
Okay.
it takes a little while to turn that thing on.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay.
We're
on. All right.
January.
Okay.
I found that online, so I kind of knew what I was reading. Last time, I didn't have a clue. Kim was reading like
Fast, yeah.
way fast, and I'm looking at her.
That's what I sent in the email.
Okay, shoot, I didn't get an email yesterday.
Some light, whatever I put in.
Okay, next time I'll email you before I forget.
Morning, Stacy.
Bigger desks.
Well, we're supposed to get monitors here, so we'll have less. Plus, I'm sorry, I have my double computers.
She said mine had two of them. Fox time.
Thank you. You're welcome. Very nicely done.
Oh, they're different, they're so different.
Oh.
Good morning. I will call the regular meeting of the Cook County Board of Commissioners to order on Tuesday, November 27th. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any adjustments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, item 3F, we want to pull for discussion.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Then motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. I'll second that.
Okay. At this time, we give an opportunity for citizens to come before the board to give their concerns and requests. We have one so far. Is there anyone else that wants to appear before the board? Okay. So, yes?
Okay.
Okay, you can step forth.
Geez, I feel like I'm facing a tribunal. Incredible to come up here and have you guys all sitting there.
So we'll have you sign in, and then after you sign in, you will have 5 minutes to do your presentation. You can also do handouts too if you like.
Jeannie, did we take a vote on the agenda? Okay. Oh, did we? I know.
There's a motion and a second. Yeah.
My name is Pam Doris, and I'm here to speak against the proposed jail addition. I don't know if you saw last week's paper, but there's a very nice article on the inside. As I see it, County Budget Advisory Committee, But it points out that Grand Marais is an aging population, and it's only going to get more so. And most of these people are on fixed incomes, and a big smack like a $4 million jail is a heavy hit. We're already quite confused by what's been going on with our taxes for the past 3 years. Our property values are jacked up, our taxes are hiked. Suddenly this year our property values are low, but we're still paying taxes, so I don't quite get it. And Grand Marais is a town where people whisper behind their hands. They're afraid to actually come and speak up. There's several reasons for that I don't need to go into, but I am retired. I have no one has any leverage on me here, so I often function as a mouthpiece for some of the whispering that I hear going on. And there's a lot of whispering. There's a lot of whispering about the tax situation. There's a lot of outrage over the incredible salary package that you gave all of the people that work in government positions here. And this jail is causing a hum as well. Apparently, as near as I can tell, most of the criminals that are being transported into other counties are domestic abusers or drug-related crimes or incidences. I don't see how you can justify adding a $4 million addition onto the jail, what? So they can have an exercise room and a cappuccino bar? I mean, it just doesn't make much sense to me. And over the years, it can't possibly cost $4 million to transport these individuals into another county. What I'm afraid of is that if you enlarge this jail, it's like that old saying, if you build it, they will come, okay? And we'll get a different kind, we'll get people shuttling their criminals over into our little town. And there was also a rumor that I heard that there was some solicitation of federal monies to help pay for this addition. Well, anytime you involve the federal government, you can just kiss your autonomy goodbye. Okay, we're open to anything if they come in. I don't know what you're doing to this little town. It was a nice little town, and now it's just getting overrun by all kinds of things. I'm for progress. I'm for modernization, but not at this scale. Apparently, this big stalling that you put out that was a parking garage on the top of the hill, it's got heated garage floors and a big. Well, that's what I was told by someone who visited and had a tour. So, have you seen it?
Which one?
The garage that houses the public equipment up there that has the fence around it like a military installation? Are we expecting terrorist attacks? I don't get it. I don't know what's going on. Also, the other thing that I've heard is that in addition to fixed incomes here, there's a lot of our residents are younger families where they're holding down 2 or possibly 3 jobs. And I have spoken with some realtors who have retailers who have indicated that they intend to either cut back or not rehire once the weather changes and the great tourist influx comes in. And I think you ought to make some recommendation to Visit Cook County that they throttle back on their billboards and national advertising while this road construction dilemma is going on. Okay?
Thank you very much.
I hope you'll discuss this after the meeting because your constituents are concerned, okay?
Thank you. Anyone else like to come forward? No? Okay. That will be the end of the public comment. Oh.
Is that for the county garage, county jail? Or?
Public comment is
Public
open for
comment.
any public comment.
For any public comment. So Ray, you sign in, and then
opportunity.
after you sign in, then we'll give you 5 minutes for your comments. If you have any paper you want to give us to us, you can. We can read it later, or you can contact us, individually on our email.
Okay, and I did not put my hearing aids in this morning, so boy, I'm going to have to sit really close. And Ray People from Lutzen. And I would think for all of us who read the article in the Cook County News Herald this week by 2 members of the Citizen Budget Advisory Committee, found it very compelling. I found it disturbing. I would be very interested to know if any of you would think there was anything that was incorrect there. We have, when the survey was sent out last year, there was an overwhelming response from people saying, we are so concerned about the spending in our county. And I had a wonderful conversation, a very helpful conversation with Brady yesterday, and asked, some questions about this proposed jail. You reported to us, Jenny, that there were 3 choices: do nothing, or do a remodel, and a build on, and a whole new building. And I found from him yesterday that the remodel and the addition would be $5 million. And, in looking at what that building is, just 21 years old. We live in a house that was built in '65. And you have to have regular maintenance, and so forth. But gee whiz, the house is very livable. So what in 21 years? When you are thinking about having to incarcerate people here, is your rationale that, well, they need to be here where their family can visit, where people are closer, to them? Well, is that a really good reason? When someone has chosen to break the law, if they have to be taken out of the area, is that a bad thing because of the consequence of their choices? In talking to Brady, I didn't get to ask when that $9 million bond, was put in place. But he said that $7 million of that $9 million is for transportation. And I'm wondering what that entails. Is that highways and bridges and equipment? It's going to be paid for apparently over 20 years by the sales tax. And the bonding bill that is going to be paid up in 2019 had an interest rate of 1.24. Now this one has something like 3.24, which makes a big difference, and now it's stretched over 20 years, so the payment is about the same as the one that is sunsetting. And I asked, well, what do you think the interest rate would be on the $5 million? Interest rates have been going up. And he said, well, in 2 years, we could be in a recession, and the interest rate would be down. If we're in a recession in 2 years, why would we even think about building?
Thank you,
And
Ray.
what would that interest rate be?
Thank you. Thank you.
Man.
Yeah. Thank you for
So-
your comment.
Yeah, is my 5 minutes up?
Yes.
Okay. Well, think about these taxpayers and what's happening with that levy.
Anyone else like to come forward? Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you can sign in, and then you will have 5 minutes for your comments.
Hi, my name is Kristen Sabania, and I'm here to comment on the conditional use permit for Christine Day and Alyssa Logan. And they live, or they own the property, they're not there very much, just to the west of me. Their garage where they built their meditation room, they built out the back third of the garage, is within 3 to 5 feet from my property line, depending on where you look at the garage. My concern is that the size of this business and the noise that it produces is not suitable for residential R1 living. The reason we bought the house was because it was in close proximity to the town, and it was private, and there wasn't much going on around there. Other people lived there. Well, things have changed a lot, and we've been awoken as early as 5:30, 5:45 in the morning with noise. They now say they're going to stay within those perimeters, but of the hours on their conditional use permit. But the county wouldn't have even known about this if I hadn't come in and tattled that, hey, there's some sort of large business going on next door to me. They didn't apply for the permit ahead of time, and after the county said, hey, you need a permit, then they came in and applied, and they continued to operate outside of those hours. If this is granted for the 1 year for the trial basis, all it is doing is asking me to watch over them, because I'm only year-round resident there. The two below me are vacation rentals. It's a lot of locking of doors of the cars, the beeping of the horns, the accidental alarms going off, the wailing and chanting to call the aliens in to do whatever they do. It's affecting quality of life for us at our house, and we as homeowners do have a right to a quality of life. There's a definition in the dictionary about nuisance, and this fits it to a T. It says legal action to redress harm arising from the use of one's property. And it's true. That's what they're doing, is they're being a nuisance next door. There's porta potties out there. There's garbage overflowing from them picnicking there. It blows around. It's not suitable. In the county's zoning commission's report here, they said that a conditional use permit may be granted upon finding all of the following. And I believe that there's at least 2 of these that they're not complying to. The use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. The neighborhood has changed. It's now loud and intrusive, and number 4 says the location and character of the proposed use is consistent with a desirable pattern of development for the area. Well, when we bought the house, we didn't consider that the development would be a business of anywhere from 25 to 50 people showing up to perform their audible worship. And, you know, each to their own with their beliefs, but it needs to be on a larger parcel of land for it to be suitable, rather than within 3 to 5 feet of my property. And you can hear it above the television. We all have, just about all of us have no air conditioning, so you have your windows open in the summer. There's not that many summer weekends, and they're disturbing 6 of them. But you can hear them chanting above the volume of the television, and they are from here to that house away.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else like to come forward? Okay. We will return to the consent agenda, and you want to pull F.
Item F.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if we could, because Kristen is here, if we
Yes.
could address that item
Sure.
next.
Okay, Kristen?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and county colleagues. Today I'm here to talk about the Highway Department's fueling system, the fuel pumps located near the Gunflint Trail here in Grand Marais. And I'm here to answer a few questions on some unbudgeted capital repairs that needed to be made to this system. Being, why were the repairs needed? What purpose do these pumps serve? And where will the funds come from? Because it wasn't a small surprise for the Highway Department. Earlier in the October storms, the system crashed, for lack of better words. So we needed to make an immediate decision about whether to continue to provide service to the entities that use these pumps. Those pumps there at the Highway Department aren't only used by the Highway Department, they're also used by Search and Rescue, Law Enforcement Center, county cars, the school district, North Shore Hospital, and the airport. So they are used by multiple entities at all hours of the day, all days of the week. Our options were to repair the system or replace it, and the cost of repair that I'm bringing forward today is $18,825. Now, reflecting back to the Highway Department's budget presentation a few months ago, we have proposed some significant changes to the highway budget moving from 2018 into 2019. We were finding some underruns this calendar year. So one of the reasons we wanted to move forward, not just to continue to provide the service at this location, but also to accomplish this repair in 2018. We were able to save about 10% from the vendor by moving forward with the contract in November and getting the repairs completed by year end. Had this occurred next year, we wouldn't anticipate the other categories underrunning to the extent that we could squeeze in or manage an $18,825 repair. Overall, on the budget to date, Lisa at the Highway Department, most folks know Lisa, she's done a lot of work in this area, and we are on budget to date through the third quarter. We're about 73.78% to be exact, or just under 75% through the year of expenses. So that's a bigger picture update of where we're at on the budget, as well as the discussion of the fuel system repairs that we're bringing forward today. And I'm happy to answer any questions on those.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. We'll open it up for questions, comments. Commissioner Severson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you're recommending to do the repair rather than,
As a
Did you
point
have
of
a-
clarification,
Yes,
the
thank you.
repair's been
That'd be-
made, and this is an after-the-fact request.
Got it, got it,
We
got it.
couldn't not continue.
oh, so the request is to just,
To just confirm the repair. It was made out of existing
Okay,
budgeted
got it.
items, and Kristen felt very important that she be here to answer questions that you might have about it.
Got it.
My question that I would share with commissioners is that I asked, is this just a patch to get us through to this, or is this a long-term solution?
Right.
And I was assured that this would be a solution that would work for us for
a long time.
a long enough time, as far as
Okay,
technology goes.
got it, got it, great,
And
thanks.
that's part of our capital policy, that if there's an emergency repair, that departments can go ahead and make that if it makes sense, to keep an operation running.
And Kristen's wanting to be
Yeah.
here is just to make sure that everybody has an understanding to understand
Okay.
why it was made.
Great. It was an emergency, you repaired it. Thank you for making that decision to repair.
Okay. Commissioner Bershine?
No questions,
Commissioner Duke?
very appropriate.
Okay.
This is a lot less expensive than our last emergency, which was close to $100,000 and not in your department. But this kind of emergency isn't so hard to take. But thank you for getting that up and running. I'm sure it was during the worst possible time when you needed to have everyone fueled up.
Commissioner Deschamps?
Oh, I think that's a good price. And if you could see everybody that uses it, it's pretty important that it is running, so.
Okay. Thank you so much for keeping us up to date.
We should take a motion to
We'll
approve
take
it.
a motion on that, yes.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Any further comments or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Excuse me, is there a printed agenda for the meeting today? How do we get a copy of it?
Isn't there one in the back?
No, there's no more.
The-
Public took them all.
It's online.
The agenda is on the county website,
Well, that is not helpful if we don't have a computer right here.
and you can always request a paper copy. There's always one paper copy provided. It was obviously picked up this morning already.
One is back here.
It was, somebody picked it up, so it's not, but there is one available.
And is that person here who has the agenda? Is it available in the auditor's office?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we have the emergency agreement. Valerie? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. This is an annual agreement. It's the Emergency Management Performance Grant Agreement, which counties receive to help fund their emergency management programs. We execute an agreement each year to renew that funding. It is for fiscal year 2018, so it's retro paid for this year. And I'm just requesting the board acknowledge the agreement and have that signed so we can submit that to Homeland Security and Emergency Management. The funding amount has stayed the same annually, and it is based per capita.
Okay, questions or comments? Commissioner Deschamps?
It's always nice to get money.
Commissioner Dukert?
Money's from the state.
Yes, this is a state grant with county match. And
Thank you.
this funds our exercise activities, training programs, personnel, salary, and benefits.
Great. The work that you do is wonderful, so any help that we can get to help maintain you as our emergency manager is awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Bersheim and I are on the Emergency Management Committee, and we meet every month if it's required, every other month not, and this afternoon we have another meeting. So we look forward to being prepared in case we have emergencies in this county. And we look to other states, especially California, who had a horrible disaster, and we hope we don't have it here, but you'll keep us prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Valerie, for the good work that you do. And so do you have an amount? I know there's no amount listed here, but...
Yep, it's 15, it
Oh, it
is
is.
in there. It's 15,881 is the breakdown for Cook County based on our population.
Okay. It's right here. Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion
All
to
right.
approve.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Okay, moving on. We have a new agenda, so everybody has to kind of bear with us in terms of how it's all laid out. We don't have the times yet, but we're hoping to work on that. We have the pages, but we don't have the times yet. So we're going to move on to,
Madam Chair, we can take item number 5.
5?
Brian's not going to be here, but
okay.
Brady and I think can speak to that.
okay. Would you like to start?
I would, thank you.
Okay.
In much similar fashion to the electronics related to the gas system, we have a fire alarm control panel that has outlived its usefulness, and we've got a quote to repair that item. When Brian and Brady and I were discussing this, we would have gone ahead and done this if it was an emergency, but the time that they can come back and do this is after the time that we were going to have this meeting, so we thought we would have the board authorize this expenditure. And Brian represents that this is necessary, that our existing equipment can't be supported by their software, their technicians anymore, and that this is a reasonable price for this item.
Okay. Brady, did you want to add anything?
No, that pretty much summarizes it.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't, yeah, they couldn't they couldn't repair it in good faith that it would continue to operate. We needed it, so.
Okay, we need a fire alarm, that's for sure. So any questions or comments, Commissioner Severson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions, but obviously we need this.
Commissioner Britton?
No comment.
No comment.
Commissioner Deschamps?
Is there any other companies that do this?
I-
I'd like to, when you're coming in with almost $19,000 worth of repairs, it would be nice to see a couple different prices
And I
given to the county.
And that's a fair statement, but this is who we have our service contract with. So in lieu of going out and rebidding the entire package, we have to work with the company that we have. This is a piece of equipment in the chain of the service that we have. Are there other providers? Yes. But if we wanted to do that, we'd have to back up and take a look at the entire system throughout the courthouse. And that would be a much bigger expense than maintaining this controller board.
Are we locked into any kind of contract with them for a period of time, like 2 years or 4 years, or?
I don't have that information
Okay.
right offhand.
Might be something that we'd want to maybe look at in the future? Okay. Okay.
Motion to approve.
Support.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
No, I had another question.
Okay.
What is this getting paid out of?
This will be paid out of Fund 12, Building Fund.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you on that. Let's see. We have land services here, okay? I see you way in the back there. You're hiding. Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners,
morning.
others. This is in response to an interim use permit request. Started out as a conditional use permit request. During the course of deliberation and preparation for the Planning Commission, we opted to put it into an interim use permit, which we are privileged to do. It puts a little more of a constraint on it. What I would like to do, before I get into a review of the Planning Commission meeting from November 14th, is just give a couple of definitions which are relevant to this request. The first, and these are both in our zoning ordinance, first is a home business, which is defined as a commercial or minor industrial business use conducted on the same property on which the owner's home is situated, which may employ no more than 5 persons who are not residents of the owner's home, which is consistent with rural residential lifestyle, and which is established and operated under such conditions that the use may not be a nuisance to or otherwise incompatible with the surrounding area. The second definition, which I'd like to provide just for review purposes, is a conditional use is an activity or use that would not be appropriate if allowed outright in any number, but which, if controlled as to number, location, and activity, could be consistent with the comprehensive plan and not be injurious to the public health, safety, or general welfare. The review of each proposed use must determine that it will or will not be compatible with the standard of this article, and if it is found to be, must attach conditions to ensure this continued compatibility. With those in mind, on November 14th, the Planning Commission considered a home business, and after-the-fact home business request from Christine Day and Elisa Logan at 1470 East Highway 61. The after-the-fact came about because we got some information this summer that there were some activities in play that didn't seem to fit within the constraints of property ownership and that. So Land Services went out, had a discussion with them, and issued a cease and desist once we determined that it was a home business operation. They're bringing people in, they're providing services and that sort of thing. So what we asked the property owners to do is just come in, ask for a conditional use permit / interim use permit, and that was heard at the November 14th meeting. A lot of discussion, and we got a lot of feedback, opposition and support in both regards. Effectively, what Ms. Day and Logan have in operation is a meditation center, and you can define that however you want. Meditation means different things to different people. And we worked with them to craft at least a reasonable constraint for their operation. They came in and after discussion, ranging from the effects on surrounding neighborhoods, surrounding properties, and that sort of thing, the Planning Commission started to craft conditions which were more restrictive and therefore kind of fit within those definitions of both the conditional use and the home business. That said, what happened was that the conditions were reduced to allowing 6 weekend seminars for the 2019 summer season. Basically, these are summer activities. And they reduced the number of participants to 25, and these are all available on the draft of the resolution, which was included in your documents. Reduced the number of participants to 25, reduced the hours from 8 until 4. There will be no food, no services, other than, the meditation process. And what they also just recently completed was a survey of the property to alleviate some of the primary concerns were that there was trespassing. And if you go down to the property, it's not a well-defined demarcation between one property and the next. And so they enlisted the services of Charlie Troval from North Shore Surveying, and he's identified the property lines. Those will be identified and demarcated in the future. Ms. Day and Logan did indicate they would work with the neighbors, however they could, and to effectively minimize the impacts. They're soundproofing their building. At that point, the process comes into the approval process, and what the Planning Commission and Land Services opted to do is to put restrictive conditions on the activity along with the review. So the review is going to be effectively ongoing all next summer during the process of their seminars, and we're actually kind of following the model that we just engaged for Steve and Sharon Frickman. There will be a review at the December Planning Commission meeting, which is ongoing now. So I think the unanimous approval of the Planning Commission in their vote kind of reflects that it fits within the land use guide plan guidance. It fits within the definitions available in the zoning ordinance. And because of that, the use itself meets the threshold of being allowed as a permitted use in Cook County. So it was, like I said, it was a unanimous vote of approval by the Planning Commission. They offered it to the Board of Commissioners with the hope and expectation that you too approve the interim use permit request.
Thank you. I don't know how far back a person should back up on property that's being sold. I understand there was a realtor. A realtor usually doesn't ask, what are you going to do with this property, because it was residential. Where do you, there's something missing here, because why does a neighbor have to come to give a report? I don't know, is there some place, Bill, that you can say we missed a line or two? I mean, how?
Madam Chair, that's a really valid point. And I think, in this case, if you look at the history of after the facts, and we get a lot of after the facts, generally, our department or the county isn't discovering those issues that are in disarray or in conflict with the ordinances. In this case, they've been doing it for, I believe, a couple of summers. They purchased the property in 2013, and we had no idea. We had no idea this was going on. I mean, we do rely on on the observation powers of Cook County citizens. And the fact that this just came to our attention, I mean, it came to my attention on July 26th, I believe. I was there the next day to meet with the property owners. And, you know, the conflict was there because this is, they're bringing in people, you know, they're bringing in participants, paying customers, if you will, who are also engaging in the community for hotels, food, services, and other things. So the visibility or the awareness didn't come, and it's not unusual. I think our reaction was pretty straightforward and demonstrated responsibility to the owners. But ultimately, it's up to the Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners to deem where that process fits and how well it fits.
Thank you. So additional comments or concerns? Commissioner Deschamps?
I think it's 6 weekends out of the summer months.
Correct, correct.
Well, it's kind of infringing on the neighbor's summer. And then it's for 5 years, you know, why doesn't it go for like a year on a trial period?
It is a year.
No, it is.
But that's not what we approved.
Okay.
We approved it 1 year with a review.
And Commissioner Deschamps, I think the resolution was modified during the process. So the review is really a critical component here. And we can't emphasize that enough because it is a conditional use. It's conditional on, if you will, an interim conditional or interchangeable. It's conditional upon them demonstrating that they can meet the conditions and that they can conduct an activity within the constraints of the land use guide plan and the zoning ordinance.
I don't know, personally, listening to the lady's thing in public comment today, this morning, you know, if that was my neighbor, I'd have a real problem with it. And I guess that's where I stand.
We have a sound ordinance, don't we?
No.
No.
We follow Minnesota Rule 7030, which is a general guidance for disruptions, audible disruptions. And there's a number of criteria that need to be met. It has to meet thresholds, both short burst and long burst thresholds. It occurs from property lines, not actually at the site. And it's we use it for kennel.
That's why I thought it was our
issues,
ordinance,
yeah,
but there
yeah.
is a rule that we abide
Correct.
by, and we have a meter. One of the questions that's come up is, does it fall on the neighbors to monitor whether or not they're abiding by the permit, or will we have staff check this?
Well, and Commissioner Dukirk, that's one of the burdens that we enlist, is that I will, as the administrator of land service, go in and look at their activities. And I've told that to the applicants, that this will be highly scrutinized. And does that give comfort? Well, you know, it's just another set of eyes that's going to be watching what they're doing.
And we've severely restricted their past behavior by limiting it to 25 people. And being on the planning meeting, just so you're aware, sitting there, in 6 years, this is one of the few people that I have seen that was incredibly proactive. Like, they came to the meeting and already hired a surveyor because the neighbors were concerned about people infringing on their boundaries. They already have taken measures to insulate their building, to soundproof their building, to find materials to soundproof the building that they're in. And they really are concerned about their neighbors and the impact on their neighbors, which was nice to hear from them. And then, just a reminder, we currently don't have any conditional use permits in this area on vacation rentals. I have vacation rentals. My property is 1/3 of an acre. My neighbor sits on 0.10 of an acre. I can see in their living room from my kitchen while I'm doing dishes. I don't have air conditioning, so my windows are open and so are theirs. And there's no restrictions on them having 20 people singing on their porch. So I struggle with all the restrictions we've put on a business and trying to cut off them running their business, but this is in accordance with complying with the neighbors and trying to make it work for everybody. So I see both sides of it. It was a long discussion during the planning commission. I understand the neighbors' frustration. If I was them as a business owner, I would assume they're also frustrated, because if this is revenue for them, we just cut their revenue in half and dropped it down to 6 times a year instead of 20 or whatever they might have had. So the planning commission was unanimous, which doesn't always happen. So but I can't tell y'all what to do. I'm sorry.
May I ask, please, that you speak up into the mic when you're speaking? I'm sorry, it's not being heard clearly. Maybe it's just mine. Okay.
Commissioner Bershheim?
Yeah, I read through the material, and before I get into my comments, looking at, it says that this is homestead property?
Yes.
And so can you just declare your property as homestead, or is there certain criteria that are checked on?
Commissioner Bershheim, that's a good question. The assessor would be the one to define that process. I think there's properties all over Cook County that are designated homestead, non-homestead, seasonal, recreational, but the process itself would be up to Todd Smith to define.
So that doesn't make any difference, whether you can have a home business or not?
Well, it's district related. It's zone district specific. And in the R1, the single-family residential, which is basically the tier of properties abutting Lake Superior, home businesses are a identified conditional use.
Okay.
And that gives us our process and the criteria that we need to follow.
Okay, thank you. Well, I got some calls on this. This issue takes place in the district that I represent, so I visited with people on Sunday at noon and talked to some of the people that had concerns about this, looked at the property, and, you know, I just want to preface my remarks that I have all kinds of respect for commissions and committees and boards and, you know, and the work they do and have the history, and so it's very atypical for me, because of that respect, to raise some issues. But I think in this one, I have some concerns because it's the area I represent. And and, you know, I think maybe I admit I'm a fish out of water on this because I don't have the history of being on the commission. So I certainly can admit to that. But my issue is I don't think this is an appropriate thing for a conditional use permit. It just, and I know that could be a judgment call, or it could be based upon certain criteria, but that concerns me because even with the conditional use permit, it's designed, I think, to make sure that, number one, you evaluate it, which is, this fits that criteria. But then, does that conditional use permit subject people to issues that I would feel are more important as criteria? In other words, a quiet residential neighborhood. And so I think people have stated that well. So I find this problematic. I'll just admit that. I just don't think it's an appropriate use of conditions placed on that property. I wouldn't want people chanting next door to my property, even 6 times a year or once or twice. I mean, it's by design almost creating a nuisance. And I just don't think it fits. I'm not against what people do with their businesses, but I think we as a government sometimes have to raise issues. Is this an impingement, or is it making, life uncomfortable for those that are in a residential area? So I can't support this. That's all I'll say.
Commissioner Severson? Thank you, Madam Chair. Bill, I just would like to clarify, Commissioner Bersheim said it's not a conditional, this is an interim use permit that they're asking for. Is that like a subcategory of conditional use permit?
Yes.
So it is still considered a
Yes,
conditional?
Commissioner Severson, let me expound on that.
Thank you.
A conditional use permit in its traditional form and shape goes with the property.
Okay.
So by attaching an interim use permit connotation to the conditional use, we have the ability to put time constraints on a use, and rather than it goes with the property, it goes with a set duration, which gives the county a lot more ability to oversee uses rather than just say, yeah, it's conditional use. There's a lot of conditional use permits that have been approved in Cook County that, were they to be enacted today, we would not be able to do anything about it, and it could be highly disruptive to the neighborhoods. So the interim use permit gives us a little more ability to kind of intercede and provide more guidance for the use because it's time sensitive.
I really appreciated that it's an IUP versus a CUP, but my understanding now is it's also a CUP. Right?
It will be identified as an interim use permit.
Okay. So will there be, if the property sells, is there still a CUP attached to it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
The condition
Will
expire upon sale or transfer of the property.
So the overriding IUP overrides a CUP in this instance. Am I misunderstanding?
You are, it is
Yes.
confusing.
Thank you.
We are proposing to issue an IUP.
Great.
People use
That's what I
IUP
understood
and
to begin with.
CUP.
Okay, so this is
similarly.
not a CUP.
This is not a CUP.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
And
This is an IUP.
And if you look at the ordinance itself, the separation between conditional use permit and an interim use permit is a slash mark. I mean,
Got it.
it's like they're interchangeable, but as Administrator Cadwell said, it is a specific permitting process.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So, and I also want to thank you and the commission for treating this seriously and being sensitive to both sides, because there are definitely two sides to this issue, and using the model of Sharon and Steve Frickman makes it really hard to not grant this IUP. We granted them a IUP for 3 years to operate a gallery with a pretty similar situation. A lot of neighbors liked the idea, but a lot of neighbors were against it. And it did create, in my mind, it creates a conflict in the community, in the neighborhood. So I seriously empathize with the neighbors in feeling this conflict. But it is the way it's written in our land use guide. It's written that we almost have to grant this.
Well, the last permit, we didn't restrict number of people.
Right, so I really appreciate the work the commission did to restrict the number of people, restrict the number of weekends, and to make it 1 year. That, to me, is really helpful in going through this process. But these things are really complicated, and as we grow and as tourism grows, et cetera, it becomes more and more of an issue that we want to be sensitive to, and it becomes more of a complex issue for the zoning of Cook County, for sure. But I don't know how we can vote against this, issuing this. I feel like the owners have been very sensitive, and although they weren't to start out with, I would say this after thing is like, it's like asking forgiveness versus permission kind of thing, but they've made several steps to satisfy the needs of the neighbors, which is sensitivity on both sides. I really want to honor the sensitivity of both sides here.
So the other interim use permit is going to be up for review now?
Correct.
Yes, okay. And once you do that, do you have a precedent about, you send a survey out to the neighbors, what's been going on for a year? How do you evaluate their year?
A great question, Chair Storley. What we did, and I'm just using the Frickman model, if you will. We sent out letters of questionnaire just to inquire about impacts and things like that to about 40 adjacent property owners. And we expanded, for the conditional use process, public notification requires the first 1/4 mile, a radius of notification of 1/4 mile, or the first 10 residents. So those in the permitting process, those notices go out. For the review, we expanded that circle to include more people who could be impacted. I think we sent out 35 or 40 questionnaires. The similar process will occur with the Day Logan request, because impacts aren't necessarily within the tight radius. They sometimes expand, and travel corridors can affect the impacts and things like that. I can tell you from the Frickman model, we sent out 35 or 40. I've heard back from 2 people so far.
So this really is interesting in the county because we've only had one previous, that's the Frickman. We had none before.
One with the extensive review.
Right, okay. Okay, so in our county, we're seeing a situation where we are dealing with understanding both sides, but also understanding that this could be our future in terms of people coming here to do a business in their home outside of the city limits. So when you say you're going to expand the questionnaire, would that be like around Highway 61, which this is located east of town, to 25 neighbors or 10 neighbors? Or, I mean, I don't want a magic number, but you said you would extend the questionnaire to
right.
people.
And that's a good question too. And there isn't a magic number. I think for the Frickmans, we just identified that the general landscape, looked at travel corridors, and noted that there were roads coming in from the west and from the east, and so we included those property owners. We'll go east and west of the Day Logan property. As far as the numbers engaged, we received, I think, 6 comments as in response to this request. It seems reasonable to expand that just as part of the review process.
Okay.
We want to know what the impacts are, if any.
I would think especially traffic probably would be. Commissioner Bergeron?
Yes, if I could just recall, our approval of the Frickman one was based upon traffic, dead-end road, and those kinds of issues, and having art sales on a weekend. And that interim use permit was granted. This situation, I think, is a little different from my perspective, at least, that this is about chanting, making audible noises in a neighborhood that has been disruptive and would continue to do so, even though it's, so a number of the years. So maybe it's my lack of understanding that noise is not a criteria when we grant interim use permits or conditional use permits. And I know there's a decibel kind of thing, but it just seems, I just want to distinguish from my perspective that I looked at the Frickman one differently than I do this one, based upon the nature of the business that's being conducted and its impact on the neighbors. If it would be comparable, I think then, you know, the Frickmans would have some kind of outdoor activity where they're making a lot of noise. Am I misunderstanding the criteria then for interim use permits? I mean, is there an issue with that? The nature of the business itself, rather than allowing a business or not?
Commissioner Bersheim, excellent questions, excellent observations. I can tell you a couple of things. One, we are not advocates for the applicants, and our whole sole purpose is to look at this within our constraints, which are land use guide plan references, zoning ordinance. So from that, we craft what we believe to be a good path forward to allow this, which is an identified conditional use permit in the zone district. So items such as chanting, you know, what I can tell you is that the applicants are investing a considerable amount of money into soundproofing their garage where most of this occurs, from my understanding.
Okay, is that in your restrictions?
We didn't permit chanting, we permitted a business. I mean, I don't know how to distinguish that.
Yeah, that's my question.
We permitted the use of the property to have a business with up to 25 people. I don't know that
And
we've
6
ever
weekends.
permitted what you're allowed to do when you enter a property as a business.
Right, and the use, I mean, you get into some pretty refined, I'm trying to think of the word. Something means something different to everybody. And so our constraint is that such that we don't say you can't do this. What we do is we say you can do this with these constraints. Because I think what happens is that at some point us saying you can't chant or you can't, you know, fly kites above 200 feet, we're restricting a use which is pretty much allowed. The constraint comes when we are allowing a permitted or a defined use in the ordinance and just trying to narrow it down to where it meets the constraints of Section 10, which says any use not identified in the ordinance may be permitted provided it doesn't have any adverse effect on the neighborhood or adjoining properties. That's where the conditions come in.
So then help me with this. So you have this interim use, conditional use, because of the noise, so you restrict it to 25. But why not then 5? Because then it would be a lot quieter. Or why shouldn't it be 50? This really gets to be, you know, problematic, and the issue, I think, with the neighbors is disruption of their peace and quiet in a residential neighborhood. But you're going to restrict that so it's at a certain level that you deemed appropriate by the restriction. But the issue might be, but you're saying you can't do that because you can't restrict any kind of activity. This is hard to play this out.
I understand. Just if I may respond, we're not restricting the activity. We're restricting what we perceive to be the impacts of those activities. So it's really a matter of trying to have the constraints in place, which are identified through the conditional process, the conditional interim use process, along with the conditions. So a home business is allowed in the R1 zone district, and we absolutely can inject conditions which were highly restrictive in that sense. When it comes to disallowing components of a individual use of a property, you know, you get into free speech issues and things like that, which is not my bailiwick. And I certainly think that in this case, the process was addressed by Land Services and digested by the Planning Commission. And I think what happened is that we meet the applicants and the adjacent property owners. We try and meet them halfway. They've had 50 people there on weekends. We reduced that down to 25 with the expectation that it be reviewed and reviewed rigorously over the course of the next season.
But my point is that when you say you're restricting something, you're acknowledging that it's a problem.
Madam Chair, I really can answer Myron's question. The reason of going from 50 to 25 was in large part due to the vehicle traffic entering the property. There were 40 vehicles on the property, and because they didn't know their boundaries and they were confused about which driveway was theirs, there were vehicles on other people's property. So that is part of the restriction of number of people, was the traffic of vehicles.
Is that specified in here?
It was part of the discussion. I would also like to address Jan's comment of after the fact and how we have people coming in asking for forgiveness. Honestly, in my years on the commission, I think it's because people don't know what the rules are. It's not like they're trying to get away with something, or they're trying to see how far they can push it. It's because they legitimately don't know.
Yeah, it's understandable.
And honestly, right now, 365 days a year, I can have 50 friends on my property wailing, and I don't need a permit for it. So, I'm sorry, but I mean, I'm allowed to do that within Cook County if I choose to.
Tim, did you have something to add?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to kind of touch on the whole issue of noise and nuisance and such, because the state of Minnesota does have, there's a generalized concept of what nuisance is, and that's everybody has their own interpretation of what it is. And if we used quiet enjoyment of their property, nobody else would be able to mow their lawns or such like that. The same standard, there is an objective standard that is put out in Minnesota Rules, Chapter 7030, which we have adopted. And the same noise rules apply whether it's a sled dog operation, whether it's chanting, whether it's a sawmill operation. So it's a standard. We don't go by what is actually making the noise. We go by what the state of Minnesota says. There's a decibel level and there's a time frame level, hours upon which you can go up or down or below or what. And that's what the standard is. And it really doesn't matter what the origin of the noise is. And so I wanted to clear that up, that, yeah, we're not permitting chanting, we're not permitting, this discussion is held every time we have a sled dog operation, because a lot of people can hear the dogs, and even though you can hear something, legally it's still not a nuisance. It can be an annoyance. And so part of the mitigation of an interim use permit is to mitigate that concern as much as possible. So you do soundproofing, you do hours of operation. I think constraining between 8 and 4, it goes a long way of having that, constraining that element in. So the whole concept of the interim use permit is not because it surpasses some noise restriction, but it's just because it's identified as a use as a home business. Then the rest of it, we look at noise, traffic, lighting, all those dusts and everything else, and try to mitigate as much as possible so that that use can be accommodated within that zone district.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Any further comments or questions? I guess I would like then the motion to include the fact that there'd be 6 weekends, 25 people, 8 to 4 hours. That is
It's spelled out in the interim.
I know,
use permit.
but I just wanted to
Yeah.
publicly have that as part of when that's our understanding, right?
Conditions are in there.
Any comments, questions further?
I just want to say that I am going to vote in favor of granting this, but it's with reluctance, and I certainly understand, Commissioner Bershheim, your reluctance. I've felt the same way when it was in my district. Keeping the peace in the neighborhood is really, really important. It's one of the values we hold dear. So this is a sensitive and complex issue. I just wanted to state that.
Just one more question while Mr. Nelson is here. With the dog issue, weren't there further restrictions placed on dog ownership for the number of acres because of the noise in the past?
In the FAR1 zone district, there is no restrictions whatsoever. And then in the smaller zone districts of the 2 and 3 and such, then it becomes a conditional use permit.
Okay.
So it's reviewed. There aren't any.
So size of property is not an issue.
Well, that's discussed on a case-by-case basis. And I will add that it is very difficult for us because it does seem like we are advocating for whatever the applicant is, and we're not. We are arbiters of the process, and we have to make sure that whatever decision is made is legally defendable, as it turns out. So we don't, I don't know, some people want to live by a sled dog kennel, some people don't, and such like that. So it's all personal preference, and we're just laying out the case before you.
I would just say that I'm going to vote against this, and it would be based upon the restrictions, that I think it should be more restricted to soundproof building. That's all, and that's the only reason for it. And with all due respect for all the process and everything else, but I just feel it should be more restrictive.
So what happens when this is brought before the board? It's already gone through the Planning and Zoning Board, and they unanimously passed it. So I think we all have our individual opinions about this. And so we've had a motion and a second, and I will ask for those in favor, give a hand sign. Those opposed, same sign. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to my fellow commissioners, if there's a planning and zoning commission item that's in your district, you are welcome to come to the meeting.
Right.
Yeah, Ginny has come in the past, so.
Yeah. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is Sawtooth Bluffs. Lisa is here. Morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. So yes, I'm here today about Sawtooth Bluffs. You may remember I came to you end of October, presented to you the final Sawtooth Bluffs master plan, and I gave you a month to kind of look it over, see if there's any questions or concerns or you wanted more information, and said I'd be back at the end of November, so that's today. And so basically I'm here asking for your final approval of that Sawtooth Bluffs master plan. And then also kind of the next step is going to be developing that joint powers agreement and board. And with that, I have a recommendation that we reconvene the Sawtooth Bluffs Steering Committee that kind of first started to get the ball rolling on this master plan. And I've already heard from 4 of 7, which includes myself, that are interested in being part and reestablishing that steering committee. And that would help to, since they already have vested time, they know the background, they know the discussions that have already taken place, and a lot of these joint powers issues with maintenance and management have come up in those discussions. So they already have that background in place. So I think they'd be good candidates to help us move forward to at least getting to an agreement that could then be brought and discussed between the county and the city.
Okay, thank you on that. This has been a long, long process. I'm glad that it's moving into the joint powers agreement with the city, and that many more discussions can be made. So we will ask for comments or questions. Commissioner Deschamps?
I'll pass at the moment.
Just clarification, so reconvene the steering committee not to be the board members, but to come up with board members? Okay.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
No questions?
And you were part of the steering committee.
Yes, yeah, and I did Lisa did send out inquiry to those who had served on the steering committee whether they'd want to continue, and I gave my willingness to serve, so that's all.
How many were on the steering committee, actually? There was quite a few.
There was 7 total.
7, yeah. Okay. Okay, so, we evidently have had a little break here. There she comes. That's okay. So we've been discussing the request now for the Sawtooth Bluff Final Plan draft to become part of the joint powers, which would, they would work with the city on developing plans for the Sawtooth Bluff. And then also asking for the steering committee to join that group too, because they were the original ones who put this together, Sawtooth Bluff Plan.
It wasn't to have them join, it was for the steering committee to reconvene to create a board.
Okay.
Okay. So do you have
Yeah.
any questions or comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Has everybody commented?
So
Okay,
far.
so I just, my comments were, how is this going to be used? Or my question is, how is this, is this going to be used as a document to support grant requests? I'm assuming that it is, that that's one of the purposes of this document?
Yes, especially for the legacy funding, you have to have a master plan in order
Right.
to be, well, first you have to get the regional designation, which we did, and then you have to have a master plan to put in place in order to get funding, to seek funding.
Which all makes sense. And being that, I just had this feeling, as I read through it, that there was, that it could probably go through one more step of just wordsmithing. It seems like a lot of things are repeated over and over and over. It's a pretty big document, and it doesn't seem like it says what it needs to, it seems like it could say what it needs to say much more succinctly. So that's just a criticism. It doesn't mean I'm going to throw out the plan, but if that was a possibility to add a layer of, but never mind, I'm seeing this. So our job here is to just approve or not approve this plan and let it choose the life of its own.
Well, and I can answer why there's so much redundancy.
Yeah,
Part of
that
that
would
is
be
because the process and the layout of the master plan is to go into the master plan portal for the legacy funding. And so it's following that criteria.
Got it. So you need to answer all of these criteria, all these questions.
Correct.
And so you have to repeat yourself several times.
Yes.
Okay. So in effect, it's done to be more effective in answering the grantors' requests.
Correct.
So that's why the redundancy exists. Okay, thanks. It's helpful. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Motion to approve Sawtooth Bluff Master Plan Final Draft, moving forward for a joint powers agreement and reestablishing the steering committee.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Any further questions or comments? All
I
in
got
favor?
another comment, or I got a
Okay,
comment.
yes, okay.
This is like the second time around on this. I believe, I hear from people in the community that this was done back in the early 90s, 80s. Tim?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Champ, this is something that's been revisited a couple times. And, each time that there'd been a committee formed on this, there's been good thoughts and ideas and everything. Nothing's really kind of taken off. So this was just a reinvigorated approach to this that included a lot of members of the community, included people that were a part of the old processes as well. So this is the most current, most updated version of the plan.
Okay.
Is this the first time we've done a master plan?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay. So we've had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. So if I may go ahead and just skip over, Steve has been sitting, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Steve, do you have time to listen through a lot of things we're going to discuss before you?
We expected to be here until 10 o'clock or later, so we just got here early.
Okay. All right. So then we're going to move on to a presentation on the jail, operation analysis, and so forth with that. So Jeff, do you have someone to introduce?
Yeah. John McNamara, Sheriff Eliason will come forward and we'll walk through the decision before the board today, or the next decision before the board, ultimately is whether or not to move forward with architectural design of a jail process. And I don't know if you want me to put this up on the board so you can see it, or if you want to follow along in the materials that you have. Madam Chair?
Does everybody have the materials? Okay.
But, I mean, is it possible to put it easily on the board, or is it a hassle? I'm just thinking there's enough people here, maybe it would help them follow along if they were interested, but they also got a copy of the agenda too, so I think some copies were made.
I can bring it up. The problem is I have to connect to the VPN.
Okay, well, I'm fine with it. Sorry.
I'll try and do that. John, do you want to go through the process? So the first thing that I would say is that back in June of last year, we came to the board and we went through a process to create an RFP, to do a jail study, to determine options for the long-range functionality and cost-effectiveness of the jail services that we're providing. The board approved that RFP, and out of that process, we selected John McNamara's group, Wool Architects and Engineers. So can you talk about the process we've gone through to get to here, and I'll try to bring the proposal up here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So we're back today to just really kind of summarize a little bit as to the planning to date, and certainly go through what next steps might be. So we spent a good part of last year visiting with the Sheriff's Department and other county departments to kind of go through an operational analysis of the jail, looking at various ways to look at current jail population and what we might look like in the future. One of the challenges that we had is that you're not currently a Class 3 facility. It's currently a Class 1 facility, which means that we're not housing in custody inmates for any length of time within the facility. And so we had to do a little bit of extrapolation on what a county jail might look like if you were in fact a Class 3 facility, looking at what the population of the jail might be based on the population that was housed in other locations. And so we compiled all of that information through meetings with the jail administrator and the sheriff to kind of, and looking at some different projections, different models of projections that we presented to the board in the past. We came up with a hypothetical jail size if you were to look at those population projections, not only for what is currently today if you were to have a full-time jail facility and what that might look like in the future. And so there's certainly a lot of things that go into having a full-time facility that you currently don't have that would need to be added to the facility, even with the current population that is being housed in other facilities. And so that was really kind of the first part, is to look at what your current jail operations are, what the jail might look like if we were to just serve that current population, and then what the future might bring for the county. And so we presented that back to the commissioners back in May, and we did a final presentation on it in August of 2018. And so what's been going on since then is to really kind of look at what makes sense from an operational side of thing for the county, and does it make sense to move forward with the next phase of the work. And so one of the things that we've been talking with the administration on is, do we want to, what does it mean to be a Class 3 facility? And some of the information in there really talks about where these facilities have to be housed, what kind of facilities we're looking at, and the types of facilities related to courts and to the jail itself. So those are kind of the statutory requirements that obviously you're not required to have a full-time jail facility, but with that decision comes a lot of boarding of people in other locations, which is really what the county has been doing since the probably about the third or fourth year that the jail was in operation. We started boarding people in other locations, I think, for the first 3 years, till probably 2014 before, if I remember correctly, we started to house people in other facilities. So as I said, the current jail is a Class 1 facility, which means it's a 72-hour facility, which means that you can only hold people for 3 days. There's some exceptions for that as to, weekends and holidays and stuff like that, but in general, we're only holding people for 3 days in that facility. Currently, the law enforcement center has, just a single stall sally port that leads into the jail. There was some original plans early in the design of it for an expansion on that end. So as we talk about solutions, there is room on the site for some expansion of operations in that location. Currently, the jail only has 5 cells in there. There are two small housing units in there that have. Nope, there's actually only in the jail right now. There's only 5 beds currently in the jail. As we look at the facility there's a one housing pod near the booking area that's also used as a kind of a classification and where people come and go to get to court. And then there's a smaller housing unit that's got 2 beds in it as well. And then there's a small work release area, which may be what's being referenced for there, that has, I think, the capacity of about 5 to 8 work release individuals in that location. Currently, the jail is a jailer dispatcher model, which means that the dispatchers are also the jail staff as well. And as you grow, that's certainly a consideration. As the jail gets larger, there'll be some discussion regarding staffing in at what size do you need to start looking at having more of a full-time dispatch operations and full-time jail operations in there. And so we also took a look at the facility itself and what the condition of the building is. It's in fairly good condition. The jail is been lightly used. It does need some mechanical improvements on it. We're obviously looking at windows on the facility right now. So there's some wear and tear on the building that certainly will need to be done over the years, regardless of any decisions on expanding the jail. One of the things that we had talked about with the Sheriff's Department is there's really some issues related to space, not only in the jail side of it, but also in the law enforcement side of it. As our deputies, as the number of deputies that we have increased, we have not added any additional space for those deputies, and the current squad room was originally intended to be much larger and is much too small for what we're requiring our people to do. And as the Sheriff's Department adds additional staff in the future, there's really no additional office space in the building, which means that some portion of operations there would have to move to a different facility if that building continues to need additional staff in that as well. And then there's just additionally, overall at 25 years old, it's really time to start looking at infrastructure type of things. So as we looked at the master plan, not only did we look at any sort of capability to expand that facility, but what things would you want to reinvest in the existing building to make sure that the commissioners have a full picture of what would need to be done to that facility. Some of the things in the jail itself that were identified in the report is that the booking area is a little bit on the small side. There's really not good locations in there for searching and changing the clothes prior to entering into the jail. The actual location where we would store, inmates' belongings is undersized at this point in time based on operations. The issue related, we talked a little bit about the issue related to our dispatcher jailers, certainly as in the current operations, they're doing both jobs. And so if there is a need to have additional staff in the jail, that pulls a road deputy off the road in order to be able to go to the facility. And so having additional staff in a full-time facility is going to be a consideration as you look at how to change from a Class 1 to a Class 3 facility. And then there's some pictures in there. That's the current day room area. It's currently probably larger than what it needs to be. That's probably about the only place in the jail that's larger than what is necessary for operations in there. But that area would be a place that we could change that area into a smaller work release area, maybe have a small program space in there. So as we talked about what things need to be done within the existing jail, that's one of those areas that we could kind of look at operationally in there. Jeff, I don't know, you did a little bit of research on other facilities in the area?
Yeah, for context, I just asked Ben Hallberg to provide me with a list of facilities with 50 or fewer beds across the state of Minnesota, and then, so this is the list. The 3 remaining Class 1 facilities in the state of Minnesota, the 5 Class 2 facilities, and then everybody else having a Class 3 facility. In the assessment, the evaluation of our current jail and whether we needed to move forward is not necessarily on whether the primary motivation is that we're required to provide for public safety. We're required to provide the facilities necessary for the sheriff to do his job and for the other agencies to do their job. But the most compelling reason for taking this on first was the amount of money we were spending to house prisoners outside of the county, which has, as you can see, has been $225,000, $100,000. It's been all over the board. A letter that you received from Molly summarizes some of the difficulty that court administration and the judicial system and law enforcement has in not having a full county jail as a resource for the administration of public safety and the court process. The fact that even though we can house prisoners other places at this point, those other jails are changing the rules on how we access them. Ben Hallberg has said that they used to be able to call down to take care of some business, and now some of the jails are not allowing that, so we're having to drive down to actually physically provide services that we have to. The cost of maintaining out-of-county placements is on the verge of changing significantly, even if the numbers don't change. You saw in the last couple of slides, the comments from Department of Corrections in our last annual review at the jail. And some of the comments, to me, indicate that although you're allowed to do this now, you may not be allowed to do so in the future, related to having a dispatcher jailer on duty when we have anybody in a bed. At any point in time, if that rule were to change, we'd be looking at $100,000 or $200,000 more a year in staff to have 2 people on overnight. The other criteria that they noted is having a single person is a safety concern, and coming up with an issue where somebody would check in with that individual working overnights by themselves is of high priority. Those 2 things together tell me that we're not going to be able to this is not going to be a long-term solution for us, that they're going to put additional requirements on us in the operation of the facility as it is. So the current out-of-placement costs, broken out by boarding, fuel, mileage, wages of the deputies that are providing that service, are all kind of average, but this is actual numbers that Ben put together and gave me. This is a number from the final report that John provided, the anticipated jail staffing budget, showing the staffing budget and the number of people that we would need to staff, and the out-of-placement costs at the budgeted amount and the total. And you can see that even as early as the first year of operation, our staffing budget will likely be even or less with a Class 3 facility than it would be with a Class 1 facility and the transport and out-of-county placements that we have. The fact that the building needs some work, that it has some deficiencies, that honestly we cut some corners when we built it 25 years ago that are costing us now, and the timing of the opportunity to recapture the debt service that we have means that we can accomplish this project without it having an impact on taxpayers. It will not increase the levy required to support this operation. It'll mean the continuation of that debt service, but it means operationally, law enforcement and jail costs are going to be much more within our control, at par with what they are, or perhaps just a little bit less. And the debt service is a continuation of what we currently have, so it doesn't require an out-of-pocket levy increase. That's kind of a summary of those items. Other considerations there, John?
No, I don't think so. I think as you look at, the operating costs between a Class 1 and a Class 3 facility, obviously, there's a staffing component to it, but I think Jeff kind of alluded to that you've got out-of-pocket costs right now for transport and that type of stuff, which, at least initially, as you look at transitioning from a Class 1 to a Class 3 facility, one of the things that we have to look at, and one of the things we looked at in the overall master plan was there is a size of the jail the day that you build it, which is probably not a lot bigger than what your current average daily population numbers are. So we're not suggesting that you're going to all of a sudden go from, a jail that it has an average daily population of 6 to a jail that has an average daily population of 20. I mean, the idea is that you're building in considerations, though, as you grow, those spaces are then available for it. There's also some things that go into a Class 3 facility that physically aren't there in the jail right now that would have to be accommodated regardless of what size facility. One of them is having adequate program space in there for a full-time jail facility. The other is having recreation, indoor recreation space for the jail, and then some additional space for, medical and some of those types of things. So we have space for either medical staff or counselors to come into the jail and provide services within those. And so those would be required regardless of the size of the jail. And so you tend to look at kind of conservatively what your numbers might be and then plan those type of spaces around that. We're not suggesting 1,000 square foot, recreation space. We're suggesting a 500 square foot recreation space, which would get you from your current population all the way up to roughly 50 inmates, which is larger than what you would ever want to do here. And so there's some fixed numbers that go into converting from a Class 1 facility to a Class 3 facility that are just physically necessary in order to get licensed for that.
There are other real costs. When we look back to the section that identifies the amount we're spending on deputies out of county, those convert to hours. So that's 1,000 hours of additional deputy service in the county providing public safety that's available now. Under that proposal. There's also the consideration, you all received a copy of a letter that Molly put together, talking to probation, talking to Judge Kuzo, talking to court administration, and talking about the difficulties. This is not about providing recreation space and cappuccinos for our inmates. It's about taking care of our responsibilities and setting ourselves up to do so in a cost-effective manner for the long term. This is about meeting statutory requirements. It's about providing the greatest opportunity for public safety and public service through the court administration and law enforcement. And it's about being compliant with the rules as they are and as they could be. The better outcomes for inmates and families is relatively important for all of us. It's not measurable, but we're also not including it in our cost-benefit analysis of why we would make this recommendation.
Could we talk just a little about why going from Class 1 to 3, just discuss why you wouldn't consider the Class 2? I'm sure we'll have noticed that. So.
Yeah, I would need to dig into that a little bit more to give you a better sense on that. I think the difference between a Class 2 and a Class 3 is the length of stay that you can have in that type of facility. And certainly I can get those numbers for you, but I don't have them off the top of my head. So it really gets down to a Class 3 facility gives you the largest degree of flexibility as to how you handle the individuals that need to be in your facility.
Would the answer to Brady's question about Class 2 or Class 3 be something, the question is whether the current Class 1 facility is adequate or whether we need to change, and the conversation about 2 or 3 could be included in architectural design. I mean, so the question now is keep what we have and continue to plan for out-of-county placements, or create the capacity to provide that service in our county. Whether it's 2 or 3 is along the same lines of question as the number of actual beds we should program for.
Yeah.
But the rest, the answer to that question's a valid question. It's a question of schematic design and development and process. One of the first elements, if we move forward with an architectural design process, one of the first elements is defining the scope. And I would suggest that 2 or 3 question would fit very well in the conversation about what that scope is. What we don't want to do is come up with 3 architectural designs. We want to come up with the parameters and understand the scope of that and come up with one design. Otherwise, we spend 3 times as much money in architectural planning than we need to. The primary question is the 72-hour facility sufficient, or is it insufficient for our needs at this point?
And then I think once you step up to any sort of long-term housing, whether it's a year or somewhere in between, a lot of those Department of Corrections requirements on required program space come into play at that point, no matter what.
No, I was just going to say the same thing that John said, that, and I'm pretty sure that a Class 2 facility, you can hold people up to 90 days. So you would still need some of the same programming, some of the same space. Basically, I shouldn't say some, you'd probably still need all of the same space and programming as you would for the
It's interesting that back in June last year, the RFP that we issued an RFP to do a study and develop plans, program to take us to having a new justice center. And it's amazing how much of a hard right turn the core planning group and John with Wold did in saying that's not necessary. That's out beyond the scope of what you need, and that's beyond the scope of what you need to spend. We don't need to spend $15 to $20 million to build a justice center in Cook County to provide the services that we need. We can accommodate that with a much smaller scale project and still have the same outcomes and the same flexibility. Going back and reviewing all the documentation to this point, it was very interesting, because the front page of the RFP says, we want an RFP to build a justice center. And that scope was changed very quickly, and the people who were involved with the core planning process were a part of making that determination.
John, do you want to proceed?
So certainly considerations or options is, as Jeff said, you could maintain the current facility, stay with a 72-hour facility, invest in maintaining the infrastructure there just like you would any other county facility, and continue to house, people in other locations. As we had talked about, the group kind of came to the early decision that building a justice center wasn't probably necessary, that there was enough that could be done with this existing building that would still continue to serve.
I'm sorry, John, could you hold for a minute? It's really hard for me to hear John when the public is speaking. If you could please let the presentation finish. I can't hear 2 conversations. Thank you.
So we really kind of came down to the recommendation that was in the master plan report, which was to really look at expanding the existing facility. And so we're kind of at that time where we would need feedback from the commissioners as to moving ahead with feasibility on continuing on with that idea. We certainly understand that the site is large enough for it, but operationally we need to spend some time with the Sheriff's Department and with administration and with the Department of Corrections to kind of finalize any sort of solution around coming up with the most efficient operation that we can have. I know that there's been some conversations potentially with your other local law enforcement, the Border Patrol folks, as to whether or not that would be something that would want to be added on to this facility or looked at in a different way. That's certainly something that we could take on during that initial design phase to make sure that we're talking to all of the parties and agencies that would be part of that process.
In our conversation, Sheriff Eliason and I had with Border Patrol, we clearly identified that we would not present to this board any solution that included some option of cooperating with the Border Patrol that increased the cost to the to the public through the county taxes on this project, and we would not be accepting federal funds for the construction of a project. The only option we considered was either leasing our current facility if that met their needs, and they were willing to pay enough to offset the cost of building additional square footage, which could have advantages to us. Retrofitting a 20-year-old building and matching up a new building to it creates challenges in mechanical and electrical systems. We understand this building is a very good case in point. Or we also provided the option that if we built out, that we could build additional square footage that would be available to them. But to this point, we have not heard anything, and we would need to confirm that there is or isn't interest before we moved forward with architectural design. But if we were to build anything, it'd be build to suit. It'd be like you own a strip mall and you build an extra 1,000 square feet because you know that the lease payments are going to cover the cost of providing the space. It would be under those kinds of terms that we would consider something like that. And the fact that we haven't heard anything and where we're at in the process means that's probably not going to materialize.
Okay, John?
Yep. So certainly, operational cost is going to be a key thing to look at as you move forward. Certainly, the option of not doing anything comes with it certain operational costs that will continue over time, and as we talked about, as you continue to house others, more people out of county, those costs are certain to go up. And then, obviously, there's inadequate space in the building. It's, as we said, it's 25 years old. It has done what it's intended to do during that period of time. And now it's really kind of time to look at either rejuvenating that building and doing more with it, or coming up with another solution for that. So as we had talked about, looking at building a Justice Center courts facility would be quite a investment for the county, certainly one that would give you all of those spaces that we're talking about, but it was felt that was something that wasn't necessary given current operations and the expense of doing that. And through our conversations with administration and others in the building, it really wasn't something that we felt was necessary to do. So the recommendation that was in the master plan report was to do an expansion and renovation of the existing law enforcement center. The total project cost was roughly about $5 million. The addition to change the jail from a class 1 to a class 3 and add those additional beds in there would be about $3.5 million. And then to add on to the building and do some of the additional renovations in there would be between $1 million and $1.5 million, depending upon how much deferred maintenance work we would want to take on as part of this. We have a total project cost of right around $5 million to do that. And as Jeff had said, he and the sheriff had reached out to the Border Patrol, so certainly if those opportunities come up during the design phase, we would be happy to meet with those individuals as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope, other than I think most of the summary here has been talked about, so certainly we would answer any questions or talk about next steps.
I guess I would like to address some questions to Pat that I've heard either this morning or in the past. What is the capacity for the number of women that are increasing? Is there any sign that, there's increasing women that need to be housed?
I couldn't say with any, accuracy about that. Right now, if we do house a woman, it takes up 2 of our 5 cells because we cannot house males and females in the same cell units. We have, as John said, we have 1 cell unit which has 3 cells, 1 cell unit which has 2 cells. If we have males and females in there, they have to be separated. So that obviously takes away some of our capacity if we have both of them in there at the same time, and they cannot be housed in the common area at the same time. So as far as whether it's going up or down, I couldn't tell you.
Mm-hmm. What you are seeing, though, is an increase in mental health needs?
There is an increase in mental health needs, and it's not only the increase in the number of calls we have, but it ties up staff for a long time. One mental health call will tie up 2 deputies for 12 hours. during the day. We've had mental health calls to tie up a deputy up at the hospital because they are in our custody and they're in bed in the hospital because that's the only place we can house them for a week at a time, which is 24 hours a day for 7 days a week, which adds up significantly. And across the state of Minnesota, there are so few mental health beds now that the last call we had, we couldn't even find a bed in the state of Minnesota. We've taken them as far as Fargo before.
There's some concern that with the improvement of this law enforcement center, that you would bring in then people from the outside, just as you've done to go other places.
It's a possibility. I mean, if you have a jail and you have room and people need the space, you know, that's what we do to other jails.
I know, yeah. And then I think another important situation is because Commissioner Bersheim and Commissioner Severson and myself did tour the facility a couple weeks ago. One thing that was mentioned, just a simple thing like food and laundry. It's all brought in from the outside. So if there is some accommodation in this new center that could have a kitchen, could have laundry facilities, that would be a huge improvement for you.
Absolutely. It would include both.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll open this up for discussion. We'll start with Commissioner Deschamps.
What's the jail population been like on an average, or how many people are we housing?
You know, I wish Ben was here. He could give you that exact count. I can't give it to you.
Yeah, 'cause that's a big question that comes up.
Right, absolutely.
And how many are housed elsewhere, besides what we have here?
That's another question that Ben could answer, and I can't right now.
I can give you the 2017 numbers from the report, and I know they're tracking similar in 2018. We don't have all of those numbers at this point in time, but currently, for like average length of stay for for all of your in custodies for men is about 11 right now, and for women, which answers one of the questions that you had, currently, or in 2017, that was right around 10 women that were part of your system, either here or elsewhere. And that trend has gone up. The numbers we looked at was from 2006, where there was average daily population for males was 4, and women were about a little over 5. And so between 2000, if you take that, between 2006 and 2017, it's roughly doubled the numbers that were there.
Yeah, and I think an important part of this is the mental health issue, because you know, it isn't just Cook County that had to send someone to Fargo. You know, everyone knows I'm from Grand Portage. Their last person had to go to Fargo too. You know, that's 8 hours away. Could you imagine riding in a car when you're having mental health issues for 8 hours?
If you're having an anxiety attack, let me tell you, the back of a squad car is not a good place for that.
You know, there's a lot of pros and cons, but I think at this point, it seems to be going for what we got here. So.
Thank you. Are we going to include, oh, no, we're not at that point. I'm not even going to ask it. Okay, it's for a later discussion. I don't have my sheet with me, but I do know for one county in the state that's expanding their jail, their levy is going to be 17% because they don't have any resources to cover the cost of their facility. So we're kind of in a good spot where we're at now to offset transporting people elsewhere. I can tell you when we were talking about the effect on the jailer dispatchers, when I was a jailer dispatcher, we had a female under arrest who had to be booked in, and my supervisor at the time was a male, and we didn't have a female deputy on. So I had to come out of the dispatch where I need to be for phone calls and monitoring the current inmates, and I had to do a pat down, and I had to do the change for the female coming in because they need to be supervised by a female. And it's Cook County, so it was someone I knew. It's part of my job. I mean, you know, when you get hired as a jailer, kind of, you might not know that. Doesn't come to your mind until it actually happens, and so it's nice to have more than one person. Even when I did jail checks, I was always worried that the phone was going to ring while I was checking the sales, and by law, I have to check the sales a certain amount of time, and I have to be there for the phone, and it's a very stressful job. and the deputies in the community rely on us. So I would like to thank the commissioners and the staff that we had in the 90s, because they actually built a facility that could be expanded because they knew that this might be the future. So, and this is kind of like what the city faced when they were looking at their pool. A $1 million Band-Aid, a $2 million possible fix, or a new facility. I mean, they aren't easy decisions. I know a pool is very different from a jail. People like pools. They don't necessarily like jails. And quite frankly, 4 years ago, there was $6 million available to expand your facility, but we weren't shovel-ready at that time. We weren't ready to expand it, so we missed out on that. But, you know, honestly, it was $6 million for the entire state of Minnesota, so we might have gotten $250,000. This is a long time coming. This is something I've been rooting for since before I got elected. As a person who worked at our jail facility, as a person who knows our staff and our deputies and the burden that the current facility has. And it is a public service to our community members who are in the facility and situations going on. I mean, I'm sorry. I know that community members disagree, but this is a no-brainer.
Well, I was involved in this a little bit with the committee and have been in the jail several times on tour. But I've visited people in the jail, so I've seen that operation. I agree with the comments that have been previously made, but I think one of the issues that is important to consider here is, you know, and I think Mr. Cadwell mentioned it, is that it's time to make the decision. It's way overdue. We have some inadequacies there that need the renovation, but you always ask your question, at least in my experience, you know, that is what we have adequate? And now we've commissioned professionals on this. My observations have been that it isn't adequate. It maybe served its needs when it was built, but I think, as Commissioner Dukirk mentioned, there was some thinking that it should be expanded by nature of how it was done. But I think there's some issues with the current facility that would lead me to say, well, we can't just renovate this place. That would not solve the problem that we have. And then you have to look at the bang for the buck and the appropriateness of, you know, whenever you're going to remodel or expand a little bit, sometimes you have to ask the question, well, should we just do this to a certain standard, which would maybe answer, and I think that's something we could explore, is going from 2 to 3. But if we're going to spend a lot of money to get to 2 and then a little more to 3 and then have far more flexibility in the future and cost savings and so forth. And also, with our bonding situation right now, it's pretty critical that we deal with this now, not delay it, because we'd lose a lot of money by just delaying it. So I think it's time to move forward with it. I don't see any change other than that we need to move forward. So that's where I'm at today, and maybe looking at this 2 versus 3, but I would support going ahead on this motion.
Commissioner Sabisa? Thank you, Madam Chair. I made a ton of notes. So the big question in my mind to begin with is the Class 1 facility that we currently have adequate? That's the big one in my mind, 72-hour facility. And I attended, I don't know if it was last year at AMC, the Association for Minnesota Counties, or a previous, but a really good seminar, workshop on restorative justice, but they really looked at jails in particular and what kind of jail environments were conducive to recidivism. And the families that could visit their people in jail had a much better chance of not following the path of crime. And that little fact or a realization just sticks in my mind about how having a family member in jail affects the whole family for generations. And when you send the person away from the community, they don't have that opportunity. Their family also does not have that opportunity. And to me, that's a huge issue, and particularly with mental health issues and crisis, et cetera. So that's another issue that this Class 2 or Class 3 would offer that our Class 1 absolutely does not. And it's a crisis situation across the state as well as the nation, that we don't treat mental health issues well. And this is one step toward doing it better than we already do. So, and I think of our staff and how stressful it is to transport a person on a cold, windy, blizzardy night to go both ways. I think I was riding with someone, was it you? Maybe it was you too. Yeah, I think I was right. But you had a memory of driving in the middle of the night to far away, like Nisswa or Aiken or Aiken, to deliver
Pick up a female.
To pick up a female, and then you had to drive all the way back. And just the stress of having to be in a car for that many hours and in icy conditions, I mean, that piece can't be measured in money.
It was the deer that were the most stressful.
Yeah. Anyway, the stress of transporting criminals is a huge one for a lot of people. And I'm also looking at the stress it has on the judge and the criminals, the added stress in having a 72-hour facility. This letter from, with Judge Kuzo's thoughts and Molly Hickens' thoughts and somebody else's.
Probation.
Pardon me?
Probation office.
Yes, in the probation office, that speak to how complicated, more complicated their work is by not having a longer than a 72-hole facility. It adds stress on so many levels. So I think of the opportunity that we have with our good bond rating, et cetera, and low interest rates, and to be able to address one of our serious issues, it makes sense to me to go the next step until we take this next step, we really won't know the serious money that we're looking at, and so we can't really make a decision. So to not take that step doesn't seem like, we need to do something. It seems like we need to take that step in order to even know what we're dealing with. So that's where I am.
Motion to approve contract with Wold for Phase 1 design.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Any other comments or questions? My comment would be that one of the goals of the Budget Committee was to say we need to strategize. We need to look out another 5, 10, 15 years, and that's what this is all about. We'll get the recommendation. We have lots of opinions. There'll be further public information, and so that's where we need to be right now, is to strategize and move forward.
Madam Chair, if I could comment, approving this design process really is, as long as this stays on the same tracks, it's really leading towards all the other subsequent approvals. County Board approval of the schematic design as laid out in the contract that was presented by Wold. Design development, County Board approval, contract documents, bidding, and eventually construction. So walking down this road, spending this $42,000 on schematic design makes sense if we've determined that a Class 2 or Class 1 is not sufficient, and we need to move forward with an option that better serves our needs into the future. But understand that voting for that really comes along with, yes, we have steps, we have process, we have input, there's a public process, there's going to be a public bonding issue related to this as well. So all of that will happen, but this first step really triggers a process, and it is not wrapped up in and of itself. And I want to just make sure everybody was clear about that.
Clarification. Makes sense.
Any other comments about that? Okay. Yes.
I'm grateful for that clarification, that we're not doing this frivolously. It's not just maybe that this is with intention. But I would like our decision on this to be far more effective than 15 years. I think the last jail, 1997, so I think you mentioned 21 years it's lasted, and so much of this current jail is in really, really fine shape. It just doesn't have the adequate space for certain activities that need to happen to bring us into the 21st century. And so I'm hoping that the decisions will be for 40 years, that we will build it adequately to 40 years, because it's much cheaper when you build something with that kind of a lifespan than it is for a 20-year lifespan. And I think had we thought longer term, back in 1997, we would be spending less on the jail overall. But we were thinking stringently, and not that, taxpayer money is anything to not take seriously, but when you think long-term, you can save more money. And that's the point I wanted to make here.
Long-term, yes.
Long-term.
If you want to say 40, that's fine.
Okay, I'm going to say 40.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Mhm.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. Okay. Thank you.
Can we take a break?
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I could make a suggestion, item 8B also requires John's attention, and it won't be a long item. And then if we could take a break and then come back. We do have Amber Beth and Steve who have been very patient, but they also knew that we were going to be backed up this morning too. So if we could address item 8B, then John and Sheriff Eliason can be done for the day.
Well, thank you very much. I just have one housekeeping item. As you may know, we've been working on some deferred maintenance items for the courthouse. And for the law enforcement center, one of those projects was the roof project, which we did get some numbers in that we're going to move forward with in the spring. But we also looked at replacing the windows on the courts facility and on the law enforcement facility. And those numbers came in quite a bit higher than what we were expecting. I think part of it is market condition right now. There's a lot going on with aluminum and some of those types of things that might be driving costs, could be interest and the timing of the project. And we're not on any particular time frame right now that we need to approve this right now. I think we need to take a small step back, take a look at our design solution for the windows, have some further conversation with the manufacturers to determine what the right solution is for the county, and then spend some time with administration on what a revised budget and timeline should be on that. And so what we're asking the commissioners to do is to reject the bids that were received on it. There were 2 bids that were received, and direct us to work with administration and come up with another solution for the project and put it back out for bid again after the first of the year.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments on that?
The only comment that I would make, Madam Chair, is that the $314,000 we could accommodate in the bond and the project list that we had, but we also are grateful for John's recommendation that we can do it for less.
Great.
So we're, and the timing is, we weren't going to get this done until till thaw anyway at this point. The timing of getting this work done is still the same. The process is review the specs, bid early in the year, and hopefully get better numbers and constrain the project a little bit better. So this makes a lot of sense, but we do have to reject the bids that we received and then direct us to move forward with other process.
Okay. Comments, questions?
This just builds my trust in us hiring you, because oftentimes we've had representatives for us that wanted us to push forward and spend the extra money. And so the fact that you're willing to take a step back and reevaluate just builds my confidence in having you on our side. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Then a motion?
Motion to reject the bids.
Support.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, John.
Great,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
for your time.
You too. We'll take a 10-minute break, and we come back, we'll hear from the library.
Color-coded papers, I know. Like, look at this mess. Yes, yes.
I appreciate so much your speaking right into the.
I realize that when I say,
Everybody
yeah.
needs to speak right into the.
Yes.
Well, you
Thank
forgot
you.
your hearing aids, so that's half of it.
Yes, but
No.
Lloyd, I can hear, and Jan, I can hear with that microphone right in front.
I forget,
Are they all
thank you.
turned on?
Yes, they are. But thank you for reminding me. Yeah. Yeah, it works when we use it. Yeah.
Yeah, you want to just do it?
Where did What did I do with
So you can have your calendars. Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you calendar. Can I stop down and get a calendar from you? for next year?
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll bring some too, just as gifts, so don't worry. Right now, we're giving, I'm happy to give you one anytime. But we're giving them with purchases, but you don't have to make a purchase. So I just wanted to clarify that, in case you went to the store and I wasn't there and, somebody said, no, you can't.
Well, I know last year you brought them here.
Yeah, but thanks for reminding me. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. Okay, all right.
Thanks for waiting.
We were told between 9:30 and 10, and I expected it to be late, but we just wanted to be sure.
Well, I burned up a lot of time on that.
Yeah, and we've been early on so many occasions. Just looking for yeah, today was big. And I brought the beautiful in color.
Yeah, I see everybody's got that, so that's good. I asked Jeff, did you want a bigger size one instead of a little?
I brought it from meeting last night, and thank you. But so far, I've got my notes all messed up.
Gonna unveil.
Oh, here it is.
To people today, this is gonna be the first public announcement of it.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Okay. Yeah. If you had, of course you do. Yes.
I just took a picture of the meeting last night and put it in my economy briefcase that fell apart.
Yeah.
We're always around. It's to get on and off, and it's worth
Eight minutes typing instead of.
Even though it dropped the gas prices.
So everybody, that wasn't what they were showing.
But then it's really hard if someone says, Heidi, can I see your notes? Because I write just as bad on the iPad as I do in real life.
Well, that's why I have to go back to the office this afternoon and read my minutes and start on my writing this up, because if I wait a week, I don't know what that word was that I wrote there.
Okay, so like opioid summit?
Yeah.
See, so I write during the meeting, but if
And you write it on, you write
Yes.
it on there. Well, see, if I could do that and then somehow transfer it.
I suppose if you typed it, you could erase it too, because you can erase this whole thing.
Okay.
You have to hit buttons to do it, so you don't have to erase it that way. But I
I
mean,
really do like the recording though.
like like Allison wanted to notes on her. I write like Grandma Shar. So then I had to type it up.
So then you have to type it anyway, so that's
Yeah.
why he was
But-
saying something about typing them in.
But this is really cool because I can do this during the meetings.
Postage cards.
That's why I have both of them up, because then I leave that so I can see where we are and I can jump to.
Okay.
But then I hit this accidentally because that's new, and so I had both screens on different things, and I was like, damn it.
It was not to get sick. This is the whole thing gets sick.
Do you want chocolate? Kids work at Starbucks, and Starbucks has these.
And you get 60 people or it's 60 people those shows when they get so crowded.
So I ordered these, and this version
Try to break off and kind of heavy up in your food.
in a case that I can't return, and I couldn't use it. I'm like, yeah, bring it up. But,
Yeah, same idea, same thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, traffic in there, yeah. Oh, wait, That doesn't go with any of my colors, and, you know, this is quite a meeting.
I apologize. Should we just get by?
Okay, this will be fun.
Money on honey.
Whatever all that is.
It is the city. Okay, then that's the first thing. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, it's in the package. Okay.
Okay. All right. Safety standards.
Yeah, there's a mic.
Okay, we're all back. Okay, so we have Steve from the Public Library before us.
Yeah,
Going
hello.
to give us a good update.
Okay, so Jeff told me that you all have the budget document, and if you have questions about that, we can talk about that. I also left for you, last year, as you know, the library went through a strategic planning process, and then after they did the strategic plan, the library staff put together a work plan for 2018. And so you'll see what says Graham Ray Public Library 2018-2022 strategic plan is the work, it's the strategic plan and the work plan that was approved by the board exactly 1 year ago today. And then what you have in the second packet says 2019 work plan. So that's what the staff has put together in terms of our proposal for what we're intending to do to work towards the goals of that strategic plan during 2019. So the strategic plan was adopted November 27th, and I haven't had a chance to update it, but this work plan was adopted by the board last night at their board meeting, November 26th. And then the third thing I dropped off for you is the first public unveiling of the winter activities that we have planned, the film series and the winter presentations, the Winter Wednesdays series. I haven't made that public yet because if we do it too far before Christmas, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but you'll be seeing press releases and things come out closer to Christmas in regard to that.
And you have some of your board members with you?
Yep, I have Jay here, and I have Helen and John over
welcome.
here.
Okay.
That's our budget committee at the library. So, and of course, Jan is the county commissioner who's the representative on the library board.
Was there anything you wanted to point out?
Well, do we have anything that you feel should be pointed out, Jay?
A couple of things on the, if you look at the 2019 budget line, in the purple at the bottom, that's the 215, that's the designated fund that the library has, which in the past had been used kind of as a kind of backup sort of fund for emergencies and things like that. In the past couple of years, having to do with or corresponding with the higher requests that the library put to expand staffing to the recommended levels, we dipped into that fund in order to continue the purchasing levels for new materials. If you look at the 2019 budget, we have already gotten that down to a neutral impact on the 215 account, which is something that we said we would do within 5 years. So that responsibility, we saw that as a pretty important thing to pursue that pretty aggressively, and we were able to do that.
Good.
There are a couple of things hanging out there. Everybody knows the situation with the library friends, and we've really depended on them. They've given us significant contributions towards our operating budget in the past few years. This year, 2018, we received $15,000 from them just in cash, and that's not counting other kinds of support that they've given us along the way. In 2019, that amount that we've received is going to be $6,000. So that's a big hit. And then 2020, if they don't have a book sale, I'm expecting it'll be much less than $6,000. I'm not anticipating zero, but it could be potentially zero. We're not sure what the future is there. The Library Friends Group, just to clarify, there's a little bit of role confusion between the Library Friends and the library, and people often conflate the two and think that they're the same organization. They're not. The Library Friends is its own 501c3, so it's a different organization. It's not part of the library. There are friends, so there's a close relationship, but the library is not the friends are not the library. If they can't find a path for their future, it's a serious issue for us, and it will have serious ramifications for how we do business. You know, people have talked to me many times about how much programming and how many new books and things that they're seeing in the library and how much they appreciate that. One of the reasons it's that way is because the library friends have come forward with the kinds of support that they have. And so without them, I'm very concerned about our future, or about the future path that we have if they can't find a better footing for themselves.
And on that, we spoke about this at length. We had just had our board meeting last night at the library. And the three things that have been identified by the Friends of the Library that they need, and I say this just to make it in the public sphere, is they need a safe, heated-ish storage space for their books, a place where they can store the books for the book sale and go through them. They need a recycling avenue for the books that they are not able to resell, which has been the nearest place that we've identified is Two Harbors, which is challenging. And they need manpower. They just need people to be there and be willing to sort through the books and to do all that, all the preparatory work, and also to move the books for the book sale itself. The book sale itself has always been a standard of the Fishpick weekend. It also dominates those people's lives for 2 days. So during the Fishpick weekend.
I can speak to that particular part of being on the Library Friends, because that's how I became oriented to Cook County and people within Cook County. I joined the Library Friends. And you meet a lot of people, and you do find out in that regard what the intense amount of work goes into that book sale. You know how difficult it is to sort things that are valuable for resale. And at that particular time, I was also liaison to the library board, so I saw how the library board and the Friends interrelated with each other. So I think that what is being said about the identity of that book sale. It was, as I understand it, the first book sale was in a tent on the library lawn. And it was pretty much people bringing what they wanted to pass on to someone else. Like that. So it was friends to friends. And it grew from that to the kinds of funds that Steve is talking about. And the amount of value that they're not just giving their friends books, but they're able to specify what they want that money to go for as they see what the library is not being able to pay for in other ways. And so that it's a very, very significant concern.
And they reach out to the other schools also.
Yeah,
so that's a big
I mean,
help too.
when you talk about the impact that the Library Friends has in our community, I just said we received $15,000 in 2018. That's probably less than half of what they distributed to libraries around the county. And at Grand Portage, at the West End, I think maybe even the law library here might get a little bit. I'm not sure where all they've distributed, but the clinic gets some, each of the schools gets some of the daycares get some. That money is distributed widely around the county, and the impacts are going to be felt countywide. Anyway, that's Library Friends.
Yeah.
Back to the library. If you have questions about our budget, we're prepared to answer questions in regard to that. If you'd care for me to call out some highlights for things that we accomplished in 2018 and that we're looking forward in 2019, I can address that. I'm willing to take the discussion whichever direction you would like me to go with it.
You could point out a few things, your accomplishments, that's always good.
So in the 2018 work plan, you'll note that, let's see, do people remember when we brought Spark It to Cook County and we went to the various locations around the county? I learned a lot from that. The woman who was our contractor for that was supposed to write us a report. The report has not been forthcoming, and I've been advised it's because she has kidney cancer and is hospitalized, and so we're still hanging out hope there that we'll get that report. But there were things that I learned from that were really important. one of the things that really stands out to me is at the far ends of the county, people weren't using the library at all because it's too far. And so if they're coming from, say, Dryden's, if they're coming this way, they don't even stop in Grand Marais. They go on past, and so they're not stopping to use the library. And to come here on a weekly basis to use the library is really a stretch for them. So I worked with them a lot about how can you get services at your remote location? And we talked about Mail-a-Book, and we've talked about the downloadable books and audio books, and now the magazines. You've seen there's been some press releases. This kind of stuff that we're doing is a form of outreach to the far reaches of our county, especially with broadband in place. It's easy for people to get access using these kinds of tools and to download things. And that was true at the west end too, is if they're going to town, it's just about as easy for them to go to Two Harbors as it is to come to Grand Marais. And so they're often looking in a different direction. So talking to them about, well, you've got this library and you're helping to fund it. Here are some tools that you can use to get access to library materials defined by the state. You're a user of the Arrowhead Library System, and we are your library. So talking with them about how they can do that. That was a big event, and I felt like I learned an awful lot about people and some unexpected things. Like even people who live what you think is really close together, they can be wildly different in the nature of their local community and what their needs are and what kinds of things are important to them, which I guess I sort of knew intuitively. I mean, this is Cook County after all. But just to see how extreme some of those differences were just a few miles apart really surprised me. And to get a beat on what some of those are and what people's specific things are. Another thing that really surprised me is there are parts of our county that I tend to think of as being kind of far away, but people who live there typically are coming to town at least once a week, if not more often. And then there are other places where you think are kind of close and people aren't really coming to town that often. And so there were some little things that I learned like that. I really would like to get her report because she was part of what we paid her for was she kept like detailed logs and interviewed people individually, and I really wanted to get the summaries of the things that she collected. Given the situation, I'm still hopeful we'll get it, but recognizing that it may not happen. And so then in the 2019 work plan, the board was really pleased with the results of this and what came out of it. And in the 2019 work plan, we're going to have a line that says that we'll do some kind of an outreach activity around the county like that again. Let's see. Oh, in the programming that builds community. So building community was one of the major goals that the library board selected for the strategic plan. And so just recently at the library they had this Fast Friends event, and it was new. We hadn't tried it before. It's a little bit like speed dating, only it's speed friending. But it was the idea was to get people to come to the library and use it as a social space to get to know each other, and to do it in the library is a safe space. It's a community asset and that kind of thing. And it was apparently extremely successful. There were 21 people who attended. I've met several people who were there, and the response that I've heard from them has been overwhelmingly positive. One woman said, "That was so much fun. As soon as they offer another one, I'm signing up." That she wanted to come and do it again. And I know of another person who's sort of reclusive, if not accurately described as a hermit, who showed up for it and who apparently just had a ball. So I think you'll see in the 2019 work plan, and in fact on the Winter Wednesdays or the Winter Series schedule, March 20th we have a Fast Friends event on our Winter Wednesdays schedule because that was so successful. So we'll be planning to do more of that as we go forward. So I think it's important to note that the work plan that we have for a year isn't necessarily, this is just what we're going to do this year and then we're going to forget it and we're going to move to the next year. Some of this stuff will continue on as we go forward. Let me think a minute here. What else would be worthy of calling out? One of the things that the board identified in the strategic plan when they put it together was that they wanted to see us cooperating with lots of community partners. And I think we have a history of that, but by designating that and then putting this work plan together, it gave us an opportunity to list and enumerate some of the partners that we've worked with, and you can see that the list is pretty long. So if you look on page 16 of the 2018 plan where it says work with partner organizations, you can see how many different organizations we've worked with, and probably that list doesn't include everybody because it's really hard to keep up with all the things that we do there. But that's planning, as we go forward into 2019, we're planning to do that again. And we'll be working with a new partner, the Grand Marais Playhouse. And I'm looking forward to the things that we're going to be doing with them, where we'll be doing readings of plays in the library and those kinds of things. And we'll be working with care partners. If you look on the Winter Wednesdays activities, we're going to be doing something on January 16th at the library, Complete Your Healthcare Directive. Because many people start that, then they get overwhelmed by it. They're not quite sure how to move forward. And so Care Partners is going to work with us to have an event at the library where people can come and they can listen and they can ask their questions and maybe get some guidance as to how to get that completed. So
Did you have something to add?
Yes, I would like to say something about the Arrowhead Library System, which you people send a direct payment to, and how that is being influenced by what is happening with our library board. We just received a new form of suggestions and models of how we might conduct our business and so forth from 2017, and in that particular presentation, they had suggested that we are moving away from just providing materials. In other words, the old model of the library being where you go to just get books or stuff to take with you to do something someplace else is being changed to where what can you do for and with your patron. And so the models that Steve is showing you in regard to the kinds of objectives and strategies and meeting strategies have to do with people having opportunity to do things together in the library and having that. And of course, whenever we're talking about books on tape, but we are still stretching as a board. And incidentally, I'm the library board president. We are stretching to try to get more of those kinds of things at the extremes of the county. It is always, as long as I've been connected to the library, and library friends have always wanted people that have come, they want their board members to come from the county. They want people that come together in that regard. So I see this as a very positive move that ALS has done.
So, anything else? Otherwise, I'll open it up for questions or comments.
Sure, I would invite the questions.
Okay.
So.
Questions or comments? Commissioner DeShawn?
How many visitors to the library?
The number is around 70,000 a year.
About the same as last year.
Pretty close. It's maybe tracking down just a little bit. Most of the library industry, beginning in 2011, saw traffic heading slightly downward as people got better and better internet connectivity is one of the speculations as far as to what could be the cause of that. In Cook County, we had the opposite thing. Usage grew through the 2010s. 2012, the addition was added onto the library. There was a lot of people didn't have internet access, and so usage continued to grow. Now that we've got broadband here, it feels like we've peaked. I'll know better when I get the final usage numbers for 2018 that I compile in the annual report that in the spring each year. But it feels like maybe we've peaked a little bit. That's not necessarily the best number to judge us on because there's all kinds of other things that go into that, is like what's the quality of the experience. Is somebody running, grab a video and run out? we count that as a foot traffic at the counter at the door. Is that the same kind of an experience as somebody who comes in and says, I've got this new computer and I don't know how to use it, and you sit down for an hour with them, orienting them to their new device? So we're doing more of that kind of work. So there's many different kinds of measures that we can use, and those are mostly detailed in the library annual report that's filed every year. And I can give you a link to where you can go get access to those if you'd like.
Yes.
Yes, I did want to speak to that as well, because I am also a neighbor of the library. I live right across the street. I can see the car traffic. They park on the two sides of our property. And I also trot into the library, as you might imagine. And even the day before Thanksgiving, when the library was open, and the foot traffic was very, very small. Very, very low is probably the best way to say that. But every one of those people in that library at that time were extremely busy. And if you've ever had any association with a teacher and you have snow days, and you know this is the catch-up time, this is the time that you don't have people who actually, in some sense, need a one-to-one tutorial on whatever it is that they're coming with their problem. And that takes a lot more time than passing out several, books, even stacks of books to some patron, or numbers of patrons. So I think our numbers of people coming in may not suggest that we are a busy, busy place, but we are.
I think intuitively, where we're seeing decreases is people that were borrowing videos, but with high-speed internet, they've got a Netflix subscription or Amazon Prime or Hulu or something like that, where they're getting videos. That feels like that's where we're seeing the impact in the library. Videos still circulate a lot.
I think to add on what Ellen was saying, the type of clientele that we're seeing is shifting more towards the users of technology and the users of the resources that the library have, which tend to be a little bit more personnel intensive, which we anticipated, and that's why we staffed the way that we chose to, and we had the county board's support in doing that, and that's really where we're at to be able to provide the level of service that the library is committed to, and to continue to meet the needs of the people in our community. One of the things, even if we see actual physical visits to the library going down, the online ebook and e-audiobook circulation that we've seen through different apps that they've released. They've released a new app called Libby, which I have on my phone. I listen to lots of ebooks on it. Has caused circulation to go up significantly. With that, that also played a factor in our getting voted a 5-star library again this year. So that's 11 years in a row. So our library is something we should be very proud of, and it is the library and the library board and staff are very actively seeking to continue to meet the needs of our community, both academically and professionally, in providing access to information that they need to better themselves and to continue their educations. Whenever I go there, I often see a couple of people who I know are in academic programs using the library as their study place, and there really isn't any other place to do that in Grand Marais. So it's a great resource to have. And looking at the budget, and we'll continue with questions as you have it, but looking at the budget, you'll notice that the 2019 budget is under the 5% threshold.
Mm-hmm. Thank you on that. Commissioner Dukert?
I'm hoping that on your 55 and older that you'll make exceptions. I have a 46-year-old sister who's disabled, and the Y in her neighborhood had made an exception, and she's allowed to go to Silver Sneakers because she's not disruptive. It's just one consideration.
It's just the title of the event. Yes. It's not the defining characteristic of it.
Thank you for bringing Ellie Crew to the community for the transgender discussion. That was huge. And I do know people in my district who do get the books delivered to them, so that's
Oh,
very
good.
helpful.
Getting mail a book.
When they don't drive at all and don't
Mhm.
have a vehicle, that's a big thing for them to get the book, and I didn't know about that program until I
Yeah.
saw that person. I'm like, what, you get books to your house?
It's one of the strongest forms of outreach we can do is just to help people be aware of services that are available to them already. But this was one of the things on the Spark It tour was I'd say to people like, are you using Mail-a-Book? And they go, they still do that. And people like have participated in the past, but somewhere along the line they dropped off and didn't even think it was available anymore. And just to say, yeah, it's still available. If you liked it in the past, it's probably even better now, and to encourage them to participate again. And so that's a song I sing pretty steadily in the background all the time now. Some other things that we're doing in regard to outreach, Commissioner Dishaw, you might be interested that our children's librarian has done some story times up in Grand Portage in the last couple months, and we're expecting some of that to continue going forward. There's a great facility to work with up there, and she's got connections
And I would like to add to that, in the events that are planned for Wednesdays, that we are also having Stacy Dulon come in, because we are trying very hard. It's the intent of the library work to bring in not only individuals that are scholarly as Stacy is, and I've heard her present in a couple of places already, but I'm looking forward to the Wednesday night in which she will present. But we not only bring in the LA Crews from someplace else who can bring new information to us, but we have people right in our own Cook County that are very valuable for sharing information. Stacy's going to do the history of Chippewa City, and that is something that all Cook County, I would say, should be interested in.
Commissioner Bershine?
Well, thank you so much for all you do. I think just the award speaks for itself, but I think we are very fortunate to have something like this here, and I really applaud you for continually, adapting to the needs of the community, and I think what Mayor DeCou was saying there, that if we can have places for people to go that don't have a place to go, then the library, any kind of public facility, I'm all for it and funding it, and that's what we should be doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for presenting here today. And the budget has made sense, and you've also made good on your promise when it went above 5% to offer programming throughout the county to help increase the value of the library. And we all know that the value of the library is extremely strong here. The 5 stars exemplifies that. So how many libraries have that rating in the United States?
I don't know the number for how many libraries have the 5-star, but what I can say that was for the statistical year of 2017, where we got our 10th year of the 5-star, there were only 13 5-star libraries in the nation who had gotten that award every year. So we were in a pretty select group. So now we've had it for an 11-year. One might suppose that that number 13 is something a little bit less than that this year. And I feel like we're fairly solid on that ground because the people of our community love our library so much. That star rating is really a measure of how much people in your community use their library. It's a measure of foot traffic, it's a measure of circulation, and then relative to the size of your community. And the numbers here are just astounding. There are people in town that I see every day or multiple times per week. There's many people that we see literally every week. The level of usage is amazing here, and that's what gets us that star rating. Yes, we have tourists and seasonal residents who use it in the summertime, and that contributes. Yeah, there's many things. I have to say, one of the things that's just a knife in my heart when I'm out in the community is when I meet somebody and I say, I haven't seen you in the library. Do you use the library? No, I don't go there. And I say to them, like, do you have a library card? let's get your library. And, I try to coax people into the library. One of the barriers that we have identified is that people have racked up fines. And so in terms of our strategic goals and our diversity groups for next year, the board identified economic inclusion. And we know that for people who fall at the bottom end of the economic scale, one of the major barriers to using the library is that they've accumulated a fine at some time in the past and they can't pay it. So one of the things we'll be looking at in the next year is, how about library fines? Do we need to change our fine structure? Do we need to change the way that we address fines in our community? And it's going to be about making the library inclusive. I've been handing out things to the board, educational pieces about library fines. It's demonstrated in the library industry that having a fine or not having a fine does not change the average time a piece is out when somebody checks it out. It's been demonstrated that the cost of collecting the fines exceeds the dollars you bring in the fines. It's been demonstrated that if you remove fines, usage of the library goes up. There's all kinds of positive reasons to make some changes there. The board's aware of those, and we're looking at, like in March, that we'll be having some kind of a discussion in regard to that.
Just a clarification, fines and fees are not the same thing.
No.
Replacement fees will still be levied for materials that are lost. I mean, that's part of the conversation we've already had.
So again, I just want to thank you. I've served on the library board for almost a full 6 years, 2 years as the city rep and now 4 as the county rep. And it's been an honor to serve with the great people of the library board. You attract really dedicated, smart, enthusiastic people, and it's just been a pleasure to work with you. Thanks.
Appreciate everything you've done. Andrew Carnegie would be quite pleased, even though the style of the building is different.
It's not a Carnegie style.
So thanks for coming before the board.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Brady, do we have to adopt their budget, or do we automatically adopt it if it's less than 5%?
Yeah, we have to notify them and then disapprove it.
Okay.
And we'll approve it anyway when we approve the general fund budget.
My question was, do we want to approve it now, or do we just approve it as part of the regular budget process?
It wouldn't hurt, it would be fine, but we don't have to.
I think while the board is here, and our responsibility is to approve a budget request with less than a 5% increase, that a motion to approve the budget as presented for the library would be good. Then we won't have to do it at the next meeting, it'll be done. And also because it's under the 5% per our agreement, we don't have any reason to object to it.
I'll make a motion to approve it because we had a pig in our March.
Stuff like that get entered into.
We have a motion?
Yes.
I'm debating here.
Okay.
So we have a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Any further discussion or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Her name
Thank
was
you,
Penelope.
Thank you.
If
Keep
you
up
want
the
to
good
put it
work.
in the notes.
Anybody want to write down
I got it.
We have a small version. Okay. So, let me see, starting up here at the top, Administrator, we have
Yeah, we're not anywhere near done.
both state land acquisition. There she is, she's been very patient.
Morning.
Good morning.
I am Amber Beth Van Ingen with the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources Scientific and Natural Area Program here in Northeast Minnesota. I'm here to update you on some projects we have in the county and then to seek approval for this acquisition that we have. So you should have a couple of handouts in your agenda. I'll just do some quick updates first. I was here about a year ago with a similar project in addition onto an SNA where a landowner came to us, a neighboring landowner wanting to sell to us. We got permission at that time. That has gone through. It has been acquired, added to the SNA, and opened to the public. So thank you for your assistance on that project. Today I have a similar project, another instance where a neighboring landowner came to us and had some land he would like to sell to our program. So that is the other sheet that I have that has a little bit more information on that addition to Mirror Creek Ridge SNA. And then the third update I have is about the long project for Icelandite Coastal Fen, and by long I mean 20-plus years. It's currently owned by MnDOT. There's been long interest in transferring that to the state, part of which would become a scientific and natural area. And the update on that is that we have been working through the complexities of one state agency selling to another state agency. It's not commonly done, and it's sort of complex. So we have been working through that. We have made them an offer. We're working through that part, how that works. So that's an update. Another new thing we learned through this process is that MnDOT does not do PILT, the payment in lieu of taxes. If this does come through and the DNR takes ownership, administration of this, we will be paying PILT on the Icelandite Coastal Fen. So that is a new update. I don't have any figures on that at this time, but when I do, I can certainly pass those along to the county and the county board. So those are the updates I have, so we can go back to the addition. That is why I'm here today, is to ask for county board permission to we've made the offer, to accept the offer from the landowner and to purchase this 80 acres near Hoveland and add them onto Muir Creek Ridge Scientific and Natural Area.
Okay. So, I will ask for comments or questions. Commissioner Stevenson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was digging through my stack, and I don't remember it. So the specific attributes of this piece of property, could you just say what they are again? There were jack pine or something that was
It's a
unusual?
jack pine, I'm going to blank on the actual name of it. I think it's on here, but it's a jack pine woodland on
Yes,
bedrock.
that's high.
Yes, it's up on the ridge above the land. And one thing that makes this unique, so jack pine in and of itself, isn't that unique in Minnesota, but what makes it unique is this bedrock community that it's on. This is only one of two examples like that on the North Shore. So the North Shore, obviously much more well-known for our hardwoods, our beautiful maple forests and things like that. So to have this dry jack pine forest is unusual, and that's what caught the attention of our program.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Bershine?
Well, looks good. Thank you for coming and sitting so long.
It was interesting. Thank you.
Commissioner Duker?
No questions.
No questions.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Any further comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We can go on to D. Coroner Services.
Coroner, thank you, Madam Chair. We approved the contract with Anoka County last year, and as a last item, I had forgotten to include a resolution that's required authorizing them to provide these services. So we approved the contract last week. We just need a motion to approve the resolution identifying them as providing coroner services for Cook County.
My question is, someone dies, who takes care of that first step before you call Anoka County, which is quite a ways away?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. I wish Pat were here to answer it, but I will just tell you that the flow of response to a situation where a death is reported is the responsibility of the sheriff and of the first responders or the search and rescue group, and that they have worked on the workflow and the process and the reporting and have had conversations with Dr. Stover and with Sawtooth Mountain Clinic, and they've updated themselves so that they know when to call, when to activate these services. So they've gone through their workflow and they've trained their responders, and they know what that workflow is, and this meets the statutory requirement to provide those services.
So since we do not have Dr. Stover anymore, they'll take over that part?
They will be the responders in that situation. They will also be available to consult as to whether or not they believe what steps need to be taken if there's an investigation into a death. So they'll be responsible for that. This resolution is us saying that they're doing that for us. They're providing that service for us.
Okay.
They need to have this on file with the state so that we're covered and they're covered.
So any questions or comments about that? Okay, so we need a motion to...
So moved.
Resolution.
I'll second.
Oh, so move, okay, second. Okay, comments, questions? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. YMCA?
And this last item, Madam Chair, is something that came across my desk. It's related to the conversation we had at our last meeting about the possible expansion or building out of a restroom facility. And this request comes from the YMCA. They want to consider the opportunity to increase their licensing in the daycare there. And if they're going to do that, they need an owner's permission form for the fire marshal to come up and do that inspection. And one of the reasons it says owner must sign, and you collectively are the owner. And one of the important things to note is, and one of the reasons why they require an owner's permission form, is if the fire marshal finds anything that needs to be corrected, then we have to correct it.
Well, then we gotta say no.
So the truth of the matter is, right now, we've already been through the process, we've already made the corrections. We don't anticipate any other corrections related to this, but you're the owner, so I would like a motion to delegate me to sign this form on behalf of the county and get this process going.
Questions, comments? No? Okay.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. Any other comments, questions? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign.
Madam Chair, if I could just make a couple of notes. Reminder of the Truth and Taxation meeting, Thursday night at 6:00 p.m. Here in the Commissioners' room. There was a question as to whether or not that would be live streamed. I'm assuming
Recorded.
that we want it recorded?
Recorded.
Not live streamed, but recorded and made available later?
You live stream?
Yeah.
We're live now.
Well, I call it more recording, because we don't have.
It's live.
It's live. Okay, we'll be alive.
I wanted to make sure that there was a consensus that that was going to be the
Right.
case, so we will live stream the event on Thursday night. And a reminder that Julie Berglund is retiring, and her party is Friday morning at 10 a.m. being here, and that before our next meeting, we also have Joni leaving us, and her party is going to be, I believe, on December 7th. You should have received notice on that as well. And that would be all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any notes to report, meetings, updates? Yes, Commissioner Duper?
I'm missing one right now, but I'll get there. The pedestrian plan, hopefully this is the final one. And then an interesting article for you. I was out of the area and found a local paper, Anoka County, and it was interesting because they had county board approved sale of $10 million in bonds, and I was like, oh, what are they spending their money on? Of the 9.97 million that they bonded, 6.86 they're using to redo a bond that they just did at a lower rate. So they're not even, so I have the article if anyone wants to read it. It's very interesting how they're doing it, and they are an AA plus rating. And it's just interesting to see how other stuff works, because I know at our meetings we don't always get this information from other counties, but it's interesting we're not the only ones bonding and what they're doing with their bond money. So that was pretty cool.
Anything else from anybody? Meetings to note, updates?
I just have a question, Madam Chair. Under the note of the December meeting schedule, I just wanted some clarification. So there will be a regular board meeting on December 18th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Public Health and Human Services.
After Public Health
So
and
our
Human Services.
our
Okay.
previous third
That's what I wanted to
Tuesday
clarify.
normal schedule. That
Yes.
we'll schedule the Human Services Board meeting, and then we'll schedule the Commissioners meeting.
Got it.
I'm assuming that we'll start at 10 or 10:30. I'll look
Like we used
at
to.
the agenda
Great.
and specify that time.
10 a.m. is Jan's retirement party.
So then at 10, so the board meeting will be at 10:30. And 10:05. Have cake at 10.
Okay. That's all I want to know.
It's cake.
Is that it?
You just want cake?
No, I just want clarification on the meeting, because
Right.
yeah.
And just for our December schedule for the public to know that we'll be going to Association of Minnesota Counties next weekend, and we'll all be attending that. And there'll be no committee of the whole in December, and no meeting on December 25th because it's Christmas. Yay! And I guess before we adjourn, I just want to publicly thank Julie for all of her wonderful work over the last 25 years, Julie. You kept us in the loop. You filled in when there was a loop that needed to have filling in, and we appreciate everything, and we wish you a good retirement.
You're here. Thank you.
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you,
All right.
everybody. We
Okay.
have loads of stuff here.
Yes.
195 pages we went through today.
Yes.
Wow.
Stacy, can you just put on the top of the agenda, Heidi and Jan approved everything?
Oh, long one.
Okay, here's the, I know. Not that I'm counting.